Before we dive too far, I think it's time for us to acknowledge how deranged things are getting in the chat right now.
Would you eat a demi-human?
I think orc would be like pork. Harpy would definitely be chickenish. Nana replied with, makes sense. Some version of orc almost looks like there's porky blood in them. Doctor replied with, elf might be similar to rabbit.
Okay, so what kind of fish would a mermaid taste like? You've got your warm-blooded fish like tuna. Does that mean that mermaids would taste like tuna? I've just realized what I've said out loud.
Dragon claw, wing and scale. Come now, let's examine a tale of the greatest beast ever considered. Another episode of Big Flying Lizards.
A question as old as time, some might say. It's one of the uncomfortable questions, but has to be had at the end of the day. Sexualizing players or players sexualizing themselves around the table. How do we do that?
Oh boy. Yeah.
I bring it up because in this particular one of these episodes, there is a scene where the players get, I shouldn't say players, the adventurers get oddly you're like, what's going on here?
There's a vibe.
And I've been
there is a vibe. There's such a vibe.
While I was thinking that, Nana Vagar, you only come at the great time. What a sequence to come on to. Yeah. So how do you do that? Because I understand D&D is an adult game. There's going to be adult subjects. I mean, you've seen it. I have no problem torturing people. I have no problem maiming people. I have no problem people. The second a player starts flirting with me in game, I'm like, what is the solution? Which, again, I don't want it to necessarily go back to session 0 because I know that that's sort of the basic, and again, maybe that is it, but I want the more exciting. I want the juicy stuff. How do we get this cauldron going? Because I know it's talk to your players, see what they feel comfortable with, but I also feel like talking about it in session 0 is very different from actually implementing it in game.
Yes. Session 0 is for laying the groundwork of what we're okay with and what we're not. And from there, honestly, you're not the only player who's like, gah! Anytime another character flirts with them. I have, as a DM, I've tried to push that into the game a couple of times to hilarious effect, because I ended up with the situation where just we had a reverse horny bard where poor Aaron was just trying to live his life, trying to get his memories back, and suddenly everybody is hitting on him. And we actually had a follow-up campaign with the same group where everybody decided that they were children of this bard who had, in roleplay, he had never said, I would like to flirt with somebody or something like that. So we just kind of foisted it on him. So that's one way to deal with it, I guess.
For me, it's just really weird because, yes, there's a level of and again, I think it takes, again, the conversations, but like I said, people have these conversations, but at the same time, when you're sitting there at the table, and especially when you know everybody at the table has a significant other, and sometimes the significant other is at the table, it's like, okay, I know this is a role-playing game, but
Yep.
Yep.
In a lot of ways, that's easier running things online with people who live across the country from each other, who are complete strangers, and they're super into role-playing. So you get some fun times that way. But even then, you would be surprised. I don't know if I just don't attract the type, but I feel like I have... in all of my games right now, which is many, I have 2 situations. One is a character who is in a relationship with an NPC, and the other is a situation where 2 player characters are in the early flirting stages, and that's about it. It comes up surprisingly little for plot reasons, for running the game reasons. It's fantastic when relationships happen, because that's something you can threaten.
I think I'm in that sort of same boat where you know a few of my players, and this is not going to come as a shock to you that a lot of these players that you know that I play with are very open with the idea of flirting with people around said table.
Uh-huh.
Which again, I don't want this to come across. I think it's fun. I think it's a fun time, but I also there were points where I didn't necessarily want to make a partner of mine feel jealous when I was playing these games and they would be a part of it, because the last thing I want to do is tie any issues that could potentially be there with a game that I love. But I think that's a good note for me to be saying. Welcome to Big Flying Lizards, a dragon movie and television podcast. I am your host, Bryce Wilson. I am joined once again by the one, the only, Colby Ford. If you guys remember from last week, Colby Ford is a professional game master and storyteller, passionate about immersive, character-driven TTRPGs. Starting with the complex Rollmaster system, he's since mastered multiple systems, designed custom small group campaigns, and introduced many to tabletop RPGs. Known for his inclusive GM style, he crafts rich cinematic worlds. Please welcome back Colby to the show. Colby, how are we doing?
I feel welcome. I feel very welcome.
Today, we are talking about the same show that we were talking about last time, Delicious in Dungeon, or Dungeon Meshi, but we are covering episodes 7 through 12. Colby, right off the top, initial thoughts of these 6 episodes.
I feel like this is where this show has started to show itself. We've been establishing some tropes and establishing the world, and now we're getting a little hint of mystery and a little hint of the deeper world building, which I appreciate. Obviously, we're not getting that deep into it yet, but yeah.
Yes, I really do enjoy where we're going with this show, and I also do think that there has been just a total tone shift, especially after when the gnome is talking to the human about how the elves are asking for the deed back to his land. I feel like this show is starting to take on a darker tone. This is where we're starting to get a lot of the darkness. That's because, yes, D&D has that lucky go happy tone, but these stories that people are telling, it's like D&D is a dark world. Like if you actually take a step back, you take all the humor out of it, you have a group of killers that are going around killing for money. And yes, there's other people doing it, but there's other people doing it.
Yes.
This is not something that's like we talk about in this modern age of death squads in countries. These are death squads going around like completing missions for people of power. And yes, our heroes in this story are going to try to kill a dragon, but especially in IV, dragons have levels of intelligence. So like it just is a weird way to be like taking these sort of conversations and just making it so that they are these dark stories with dark undertones. And then we're starting to get like the political side of it, where there's actually this ancient war between the elves and the dwarves, and the elves are trying to take back this land that used to be theirs, where they had like loophole contracts with the humans. It's like you said last time, they understand D&D, but they're lifting the hood and showing us the deeper side. And I really appreciate that they had us do the nice soft landing, and now we hit the drop off to get into the good meaty stuff. No pun intended for Dragon Steaks.
Yeah. Well, and to like pick at something a lot later in one of the last episodes we'll cover today, Marcille is talking about how healing magic can be used for torture. This is one of the things that I love about this show, is that they assume, okay, all of this stuff is real. Let's put this in a real world. Let's see what comes of it. And you find that some of the assumptions you need to make to have this dungeon crawling gamey experience that we all enjoy creates some eventualities that are really dark.
I do agree. I really enjoy that they are getting into this darker side, and they've been sort of hinting at darker sides of it, but like in a joking way, where they're talking about like, oh, are we gonna eat demi-humans? Ha 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 ha. Like, okay. There
Mm-hmm.
we go. But now we're
Yeah, and the orcs and racism and yeah, like these are things that just come out of the situation we've created for ourselves, and the show is taking them seriously. It's not just like hand waving them away, and I love it.
Yeah, and I again just going back to what we just said last week, I'm gonna try to limit how much I say it, but at the same time, like I'm not gonna fault anyone for saying it. You can tell that they're fans of D&D and they're not like, yes, they're taking things there and making it their own, but I think especially nowadays when people are taking either modern media or modern subjects and making it their own, I feel like so many people try to make it their own by like changing the story fundamentally. So it's like they're trying to change the arch piece. But what I'm seeing here is they're actually they're not even doing that. They're just carving something different on it. They're trying to put their own twist.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the twists I really love and enjoy. Some of them I'll talk about a particular one later down the line. But
Uh-huh.
I at least enjoy that they're not like trying to uproot and change this game, or not even a game, but like this idea of
Mm-hmm.
a TTRPG, as much as I see other people try to make things their own. What are your thoughts on that front there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they're coming at it from a direction of taking it seriously, which I think you can say it as like they're coming at it as fans. That's certainly one way to take it. I mean, and I think I don't know what specifically you're alluding to, but like I think that to be a fan of something, you don't have to think that it's perfect or that there aren't inconsistencies or things to be improved along the way. So yeah, I mean that is how you recycle this stuff. That just be how art is. You take old stuff, you remix it, you add your own context, and it's art.
Before we dive too far, I think it's time for us to acknowledge how deranged things are getting in the chat right now, because it all started with
Yeah.
Dr. Jack
Would you eat a
Wright
demi-human?
saying, which turned to, what would they taste like? I think orc would be like pork. Harpy would definitely be chickenish. Nana replied with, makes sense. Some version of orc almost looks like there's porky blood in them. Doctor replied with, elf might be similar to rabbit. And Nana wraps it all up with, I imagine Harpy would be a bit gamey like duck. Y'all are in the right place. Y'all are in the right community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
These are the real intellectual questions we're asking around here.
Okay, so does that mean that a mermaid what kind of fish would a mermaid taste like?
Ooh, halibut?
Because you've got your warm-blooded fish like tuna. Does that mean that mermaids would taste like tuna? I've just realized what I've said out loud. My bad. I just gotta look for my
Well,
wife.
Colby, there's websites that will let you know exactly what they taste like. If you don't have an adult blocker on your phone.
Sorry, Bryce. They're gonna have to turn off safe search to find your podcast now.
They had to already.
Surf and
We
turf,
talked
baby.
we covered House of the Dragon. We've talked incest. We talked about
Fair.
incest on this project. But
Yeah, the worst
before
we really
dive,
need to deal with is fan service.
we got it. We got handfuls of it in this episode. But before we go too down this rabbit hole, let's go ahead and talk chapter 1 of the podcast. Chapter 1, Depths of Desperation, covering episodes 7 and 8. Episode 7, Kelpie. Cabru's party is resurrected, but deceived about their deaths. Senshi's Kelpie, Annie, betrays him, leading to her death. Laios cooks porridge with mermaid eggs, grossing Chilchuck. Marcille makes Kelpie soap, allowing the party to cross the lake. Kraken battle, Senshi kills it with the trident, but a parasitic worm infects Laios. Episode 3, Raspberries. Marcelle's flashback, her dream of a balanced dungeon versus Fallon's approach. Chilchuck plans their approach to the dragon. Marcille provokes an underline, leading to blood loss. Senshi feeds her iron-rich kelpie liver while eating a tastier meat without her. Another parting, including an ex-member, Namari, smells their cooking and investigates. So, these first 2 episodes always enjoy a good Kraken fight. Like,
Yeah.
I do think it was a little bit underwhelming for how a Kraken actually is in D&D, because Krakens are like endgame bosses.
Yeah, they're top tier monsters. Yeah.
And like, yes, I get it. They want something big and scary in water, and what's bigger and scarier than a Kraken? Like, but at the same time, like, they're like Tarask level, right?
Yes. Yeah, they
Yeah.
are. I forget their CR in V, as if that means anything anyway, but they're meant to be huge. I just threw a level 11 party at adolescent Kraken, and that was not an easy fight either. So like they're meant to be huge, and I agree that there was some amount of like, well, that was easy.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely like, they didn't treat it sacred. They didn't show the proper respect. I don't know why the Italian's coming out right over here. The Italian that doesn't exist in me over here. But that's the only really gripe that I had with it, is like, yeah, it was intense, but I mean, if you guys want to go back and see where Critical Role's group has almost had a TPK, their fight with the Kraken in campaign 1, where they were like level 15, weren't they, Colby, or level 6? Like, they were high up, and they still like almost had a TPK. Now, they weren't supposed to kill the Kraken, which you can see the arguments back and forth that if they actually tried to kill the Kraken, they may have done it, but still, like, it nearly wiped them all out. And I think it actually permadeathed Vax in that.
Yeah.
Which,
yeah.
I mean, we all know Matt Mercer was just trying to take them out, so
he was trying his best. It only sometimes worked.
Only sometimes. But that's where I was really struggling with it. Again, like, I totally get it. Like, they wanted something that's awesome. And maybe that's where I'd provide some criticism. Like, at that point, just make up your own water monster that's fitting the situation. Like even make like a draconic version of like an orca whale. Like, I feel like that would be just as cool and at that level, but they're just not showing the respect a Kraken deserves.
Where's Liam Neeson when you need him?
Exactly. Exactly. Also, Laios was like creeping me out like during this episode with like how badly he wanted to eat mer people, and like how, like, again, like, I get it, it's supposed to be funny, but like how he sort of like just snuck the mermaid eggs in there. I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just thinking of it now. I didn't think of it the last couple times I watched it, but it kind of does feel like these first 2 episodes are a continuation of the same like style of the first few episodes, and maybe they were trying to cram a little bit too much in or something like that. I do feel like you could just call it a giant squid. Just a giant squid. Giant dungeon squid or something. You don't have to call it this absolutely legendary thing from mythology that's supposed to be unkillable and the terror of the seas, and you stab it once in the right place. Which, to be fair, like, spoilers, they do the same thing to a dragon, but it at least costs them something.
Right. There's nothing actually wrong with this episode. I just think they could have picked something better. But there's, again, the chat over. Y'all are great today in the chat, being unhinged in some ways and philosophical in others. So I applaud you guys all. You know how I love that. But one thing that I want to actually dive into, and it's not really necessarily related to the show, but since I have you on, I really want to just pick your brain about it. But Nana Vagar has said, every DM I played with didn't want to make it over level 10. I, as a DM, would love it to make it to a campaign where they make it to level 20. Like, that is a goal in my life. I want to play to level 20. Again, I understand once you get to like level 18, 19, 20, you're practically gods, to quote a Marisha Ray, hashtag goldfish. But what's your necessarily thought? Because I know that we really tried to make it to a level 20 campaign. And again, I understand that life happens and like things go around that life. But what would you say overall is your take on just the leveling system? And because I also understand the point of like doing almost what Baldur's Gate 3 does and just going up to level 12.
Mm-hmm.
That like I get it,
Yep.
but I want to feel that god power, you might say. Or I want to have them throw god level monsters.
Yeah, right now I am running a campaign specifically just to go to level 20, and I'm taking away some of the usual things that get in the way, like travel sequences and lots of role play and setup for all of the bosses, and we're just getting straight to the boss. One boss every level, all the way to level 20. The reason that nobody goes past 10, 12 is because the game breaks down. It just is not balanced in a way to work at those levels and to be satisfying. And if you try to duct tape it together to make it do that, it just puts more and more burden on the DM, which is why it's always the DM who's like, no, we're not going to level 18 on this one. And it's not even 18. It really is right around 10, 11, 12, where it starts to get pretty hard to challenge player characters, because if you've got a decent number of characters in the party, that just means that they have a really diverse set of tools to deal with things. And I think we mentioned before that like magic in 5th edition is magic, and a lot of challenges in 5th edition are very binary. Like you can either fly and some things are trivial, or you can't fly and those things are impossible, and there aren't really shades of that. And that, I think that was a choice on the designer's behalf to make it an easy game to get into and to feel good at those lower levels where they're expecting you to spend more time. I do think it's a shame to like dangle all of these level 20 abilities in front of players and be like, look what your monk could do at level 20, except he never will, because good luck finding a DM who's going to put up with that shit.
Yeah, for me, and I'm seeing a lot of things in the chat right now that people, again, I love that you guys are interacting, and I want you guys to keep doing so. If I don't get to everything, I apologize. But I believe it was it Nana or was it Doctor? I think it was Doctor. I'm a DM finishing up my campaign of 2.5 years this weekend at level 20. I skipped levels 13 through 19 so my party can experience 20 at least once. Which honestly, I feel like that's not a bad, like I feel like that's a pretty good way to handle that situation, because like we said, levels 13 through 19 are almost filler levels as it is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I haven't really experienced what it's like to be with my players at that level, so I don't really know what what it's going to be like when I get to that. My goal is to get there, and if I have to like give up sleep to make this happen, but like we've been going at this campaign for about 1.5 years. Sometimes we do like 2 sessions a month, sometimes we're doing 1 session every other month, and we just got to level 7 after I nearly TPK'd the party. So I mean, I'm trying to find more ways to like give, because I think we talked about this last week, but I want to find like, and if you have resources that you want to recommend, I'm all the ears hearing for it. And I think you told me that Matt Colville has some for it, but I
Yes.
love giving experience for role playing aspects as well, because I mean, there's the hilarious video of I'm blanking on the guy's name, but Brennan for
Mm-hmm.
is it Dimension
Brennan Lee
20
Mulligan
or
from Dimension 20. Yeah.
yes.
I think I already know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he's like, if you're in the D&D algorithm, he's like, yeah, wizard schools, what they're gonna do is just open up like, yes, you're like, I'm here to study. You're like, oh no, we're gonna go over to this village and kill everybody, and that's how you're going to.
All
That's
right,
literally what it
students,
is.
today, instead of learning magic, you're killing kobolds. Kill as many kobolds as you can. I thought we were supposed to learn how to speak spells. No, you kill kobolds.
Exactly. Like that's how it's set up. And I mean, again, I want to be able to reward my players for role playing really well. And so like I definitely give my players experience on that based off of that. Also, like there is like every DM who's laissez-faire will understand this, but there's just times when you're like, you know what? You might have not actually XP level made it, but this is a good spot story wise to go ahead and just say, yeah, you leveled up. Like, that's where, like, and again, we can talk about this all day. That's where I'm just of the opinion of, I think there's a healthy balance of milestone and experience, because with milestone, and I'm not saying that, I I personally feel like I'm trying to railroad my players too much when I try to do milestones. But at the same time, like, if you don't have milestones, you're going and just creating genocidal monsters for your party.
I don't know. I'll warn you, this is a deep well that you have just looked down into. But this is, this is taking us into the ideas of like, how much control does the dungeon master really have? And the answer is more than the dungeon master wants. Because like, the more experience you get doing this, the more I do this, the more I feel like really I'm like creating a situation for people, and a lot of the time they'll surprise me how they deal with that situation, but you end up with a lot of control. The reason I got on this is because I feel like all leveling is milestone leveling, and XP leveling or other versions of keeping track of it are just milestone leveling, which is to say, like, at the DM's discretion, you level. XP leveling is just a way of giving your players something that is a progress tracker along the way, which is a very good thing, actually. I think I don't do it because I am so ADHD and I just forget things, and it's a detail oriented thing that I need to keep track of. But otherwise, I think that's, I don't know how much. Have you gone and watched Brandon Sanderson's writing lectures?
I am trying to do better at doing it. Like, this is also a fun fact, and I've talked about something and it's related to this, so it's a little bit of a tangent. I'm going to come back, but I just want to let you know, and you can call me dorky for doing this. But I went to a marketing seminar, and again, my audience already knows this, so you guys can throw those tomatoes again. But I went to a marketing seminar where this instructor, who's like a marketing, like, he's really well known in the marketing world. He's also part of like the 1% of photographers in the world, so he's been quite successful as a photographer. He told me that something that you should do if you really want to try to get ahead in life is write letters, like physical letters to your heroes. But when you're writing, don't write as if you're like a fan. Treat them like they're an old friend of yours. And when I heard that, I was like, you know what? Like, I love that. And he was explaining, like, hey, if you start to like view these people as your equals, you'll emulate them in certain ways and try to be more like them and view your professionalism like that. And two, there's that 1% chance that they'll reach back out and you'll start to develop that. And he said that that's how he got into the industry, to be like this 1% photographer. He was writing letters to this very popular person. And finally, one day he got a phone call. He's like, do I know you? Like, why are you sending me letters? He's like, no, I just wanted to. And they became really good friends because of that. So Brandon Sanderson is one of these people that I write to. Brandon Mole of the Fablehaven series, I do that with him. George R.R. Martin, I write to him. Probably one of the few
Keeping
people
up
that
that
still
pressure.
write. Hey, I don't mention book 6 at all. I keep them positive. It's probably the only positive mail that he gets. But again, just going back to that, yes. So I try to like keep up with his lectures so I can bring up well, one, they're fascinating and I love to read them, and I feel like they actually help me with my DMing style. And two, I could be like, hey, I saw your YouTube video on this.
Huh? Yeah, well, and one of the big things he talks about is, you make a promise at the beginning of a story and then you show progress. And that's how you keep people engaged. You need to show them that they're making progress toward the thing they want. Whether, if you're writing or creating a rom-com, you need to show that this like relationship is deepening and getting more complicated. If you're doing an action movie, you need to show the hero getting beat down, but also doing awesome things and like taking out the henchmen one by one. And that's how you know he's making progress. And I think that is a real upside of like XP leveling, is you get this way of showing your players very granularly, you are this amount of the way toward your next payoff, which is leveling up, which always feels really awesome. And I wish I could do it, but I don't have the attention for it.
Yes. I will always remember this experience when we first started our Tyranny of Dragons campaign and we had to defend Kayla's character's father's castle, and I was the only fighter. They're like, "All right, go fight him." And I don't even think I lasted one turn, and I know the whole idea was I was supposed to lose, but I still remember feeling how much of a failure I was for having my character go down in one turn. Like, I just remember
Yep.
thinking like, "Oh my gosh, really?" Like, I built this lame character that goes down after they're all watching me, these magic users, probably thinking that he's a phony fighter. But
Yeah, but I mean that's one of the things I'm really proud about of that campaign is I, that was Cyan Wrath, who's straight out
yes,
of the book. But putting you in one-on-one single combat against him at level 1, which is ludicrous. Like, no, he would murder your entire party at that level. But no, one-on-one against just one fighter, it was meant to make you feel a way about him. It succeeded, and when you guys managed to take him out, that helped that feel very satisfying.
yeah. No, I still remember when we fought him too, because I think I had just changed over to Paladin like the session before.
Yeah.
So there was like that whole level there. And so there was all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff tied to that. Say, Colby, I know that we're having a good time talking about this, but I heard somebody once say that when people talk about their D&D campaigns, it's like talking about your dreams. And that always just lives
Uh-huh.
in my head. And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
you know what? I don't
Yeah.
care. I'm going to talk about my dream.
Exactly. This is what you've put a lot of work into this podcast, and this is how you reap the reward. Now people just have to listen.
And guess what? You guys are here listening to a guy wearing a rainbow dragon shirt talking about a make-believe world that this man right here created.
Oh my god, I didn't even create that one. That was just that was straight out of the book for a minute until I
You don't need to tell him that, Colby. You don't need to tell him that. I'm trying to give you credit. Well, it's fun. And again, like that's easily one of the most fun campaigns that I've been a part of as a player. And I always laugh because I'll see it gets ranked at the very bottom of like favorite campaigns that
yeah.
people play.
It's an absolutely awful campaign. If you really want to get tired of 5th edition, play the Tyranny of Dragons campaign path straight out of the book, and you will see everything that can possibly go wrong with it.
On the other hand, Curse of Strahd, that's what I did love. We
So-
went from the worst campaign to the best campaign.
Yeah, you're here. Josh is here. So you are two people who have both DM'd me through Curse of Strahd, and I have also DM'd Curse of Strahd. I didn't finish it. I'm probably gonna make some people angry, but Curse of Strahd is not my favorite campaign when it comes down to it. I think it's very clever how it's put together, but I think that it's trying to be a kind of horror that just doesn't land for me. I find it very difficult to be scared of werewolves, especially 5e werewolves, who their one thing is damage resistance unless you have silvered weapons, which you probably have by now. And so they're really, they could just be soldiers for all I care. Like they're just bags of hit points at this point. So like, and after DMing it and seeing all of the places that it does need duct tape, it's not my favorite.
I get that, but for me, like, I feel like the duct tape that I was putting on personally, like, I created that one NPC who was the turtle that was the first druid. I feel like that was a fun, like, sort of to counter Yamababa, Yali Baba, whatever her name is. I'm sure Kimmy will scream at me.
Baba Yaga.
Yeah.
John Wick.
Like to her, she was the yin to that yang. And then I also introduced Strahd's right hand man, who was acting like was actually half the party's father. So it was happy because I think that is like a little thing. Like you might feel differently, but I feel like Curse of Strahd does not as well of a job of tying players' backstories into it. It literally is like, oh, you're here. Strahd's there, and you don't want to tie backstories in. Curse of Strahd is for you. But if you want to have like
Mhm.
big immersive, and we both have this strategy, not strategy, the style of like the story is about our players. We don't want to make them be the side characters. The villain's not the main character. An NPC is not the main
Yes.
character. Our players are the main characters. And Curse of Strahd makes your players into NPCs, not NPCs, but just
Yeah.
side characters.
You're the swords there to save Tatiana and to right all of the wrongs and it doesn't do a good job of giving you reasons to do that, which that is a complaint you can level at pretty much every single published D&D campaign. Some do slightly better than Curse of Strahd. I think I had good results with Rime of the Frost Maiden. It has its own issues for sure, but it at least kind of forces your players to give their characters some things that seat them in the world. This is one of the places where I'm acutely aware that I am not everyone, and that there are tons and tons of people for whom this is the way to play D&D, is just, make your character and they're a sexy bisexual tiefling, and you don't really have to care about much of the story. You just go through level by level. And if people are playing it that way, that's fine. That's great for them. I'm happy that you're happy. But I think that 5th edition as a whole is so burdened by so much stuff, so many spells, so many abilities, so many archetypes that you're supposed to have interesting characters around these archetypes, and they keep recycling old campaigns and old settings and stuff like that. And one of the most important things about TTRPGs that gets lost in all of that is just, probably the most important thing you can do as a player to have a good time is just to freaking make your character care about stuff.
Yeah.
Make your character care about the stuff that's happening in the campaign. And, you don't need a whole dungeon master's guide to explain that, but it's probably the most useful piece of advice I've ever had. And it's given people a lot of fun. Like, I think you did a great job with your paladin in the Tyranny of Dragons campaign. He cared about stuff, which gave me strings to pull, which gives me tools to make things interesting. And so that's something that I actually, even in my games where players are paying me to be part of this, I still force them to at least to some extent create links between their character and the rest of the world, because otherwise it's going to be boring, and
Yeah.
nobody is born knowing that.
For sure. And I'm sure you have plenty of experience of this as well. Don't worry, guys. We're talking about a TV show. We are, but I actually didn't watch the sex episode. Just kidding. I did. I watched the episode. But this particular campaign, I have 2 players that have been introduced to D&D before, but have never really had like a continuous campaign. And when they provided me with backstories, like I did have to like prod them to say like, hey, go as deep as you can, like really dig deep, trying to build that up. And they did a good job. I think they did actually a really good job. We know that there's also like, I also know, I think the original story versus the story I gave you at like level 8, because I know that we sort of updated night and day. Like it was sort of the same idea, but like it went from a paragraph to 5 pages. And I think that that's something that I to this day still do what you did in that campaign. And like every 5 episodes, every 5 levels, just check in and be like, okay, so who's your person most close to in the campaign? What is their goals right now? What is something that they want? What is something they fear? Just these general questions, just getting a feel, because I feel like there are people that just come in and are like, oh yeah, I want to make that hot tiefling that just wants to fuck everyone. Like, let's fuck everyone or fuck everything up, like give or take. It's those 2 options. But then you also have those players, and I think that we could both agree that Kimmy was always really good at coming in with a detailed backstory and just being able to like, and when you have a player who's coming in right off the bat with a detailed backstory, it's really easy to, I don't want to say make other players jealous, but they see like, oh, I want that. I want to have what they have right there. So as long as there's one player around the table that has that dedication and has that story, and people are seeing how the world is actually interacting, that's, I think, the best way. And again, like I'm not saying other ways are not, but that's where I've found like that's the best way to actually tie the players and make them invested is when they see one player being like, oh, they're getting candy. I want that candy. I want that sweet, sweet
Yeah.
lore candy right there.
Yeah, it's straight up social engineering. And, I attract all sorts of players. Some are mostly interested in, the power fantasy and being a really heroic character and don't like the feeling of their character having vulnerabilities in terms of loved ones that can be threatened and things like that. But you're right. Just the fact that if you have one player who really follows the assignment and gives you strings to pull on, then people. I've had people come to me later on and be like, "Hey, I don't feel like my character is really working." I'm like, "You're jealous, aren't you?" Like this other character is getting a lot of attention because and they're central to the story, and your character is starting to feel like a side actor because you built them to deal damage, and that's it. And then you just kind of be open to let people rework things.
Yeah. I'll hold off from going into like naming names and doing details because I want this podcast to be continuously a positive podcast. But there's a particularly very popular a very popular D&D show online that used to have an additional player at the player table,
Mm-hmm.
and that player did not want their character to have any sign of weakness. And I'm not gonna lie,
Yes.
I did enjoy this particular character for a lot of the sessions until it got really creepy and weird. But this person also didn't
Mm-hmm.
want their character to have weakness, and it just got boring. They just were like, fireball, telekinesis. Yeah, that's not a dead giveaway if you don't know. If you know. So I and I
Yeah.
also know that there's a YouTuber, but I think his YouTube name is DM Mike, or I'll drop it over there. But he does little breakdowns, and right now he's doing like an episode by episode of each Critical Role, and he's like taking all the lessons that you can learn from Critical Role and how to apply it properly at a table or what to sort of avoid. And I think he does actually a very healthy job at criticizing Critical Role in a way that's healthy and constructive rather than like they suck, they don't even read their spells, losers. But like he actually goes in and be like, hey, like there's a time and place for metagaming, we can do this level of metagaming. Well, maybe Matt, like he hates how Matt does his combat order, like reading off his combat order, and he always points that out, and I do find it hilarious that he does that. But if you guys are really into D&D, I encourage you to go check out DM, I think it's DM Mike. And he also is very active in the comments. So if you guys post a message, I have argued with him in a professional way, not a troll way, in the comments a few times. But seems like a very lovely person. Mike, if you ever see this, I'd love to have you on a podcast. I have sent you an invitation, but that's neither here nor there. I'll send you some of his stuff, Colby, because I think you'd actually like enjoy like what he says, and seems to be very similar on the wavelength
Mm-hmm.
uh, that's there.
Yeah. I mean, but you're absolutely right. We all know exactly who you're talking about. And there was, I mean, if you've been in the hobby for a bit, if you're running games, and if you want a masterclass on knowing that you're looking at a problem player and starting to recognize the early and small signs, that's really something to look at, because it is very subtle. It's so subtle, and until it's not, and you don't want it to get to the point where it's not subtle anymore.
Episode 27.
Uh-huh.
Like we laugh and we joke, but I really, and again, like I really encourage you guys to go watch this particular video where he talks about it. But it is like, if you have, like, I always tell my players that, and I try to remind them, like, hey, there is not a main character. You all, and again, I haven't had any issues, but I've tried to relate. You guys are all the main characters. You all will get the spotlight and will follow your story from time to time. But we're here to play a game together. And I think, and something like I think I revel a little bit more than you do in it, Colby. But I remember you'd always say, "Hey, this is not a us against you, the DM versus the players. Like the players, the DM is just as much of a player, and he's trying to help the players along."
Mm-hmm.
I'm an evil god. I enjoy seeing my players suffer at the table sometimes. So I revel when they start screaming at me like, "You're cheating!" Like, prove it. Prove it. 30 points of psychic damage. How am I cheating now?
Yep.
But again, like I think that's something that everybody needs to realize when you're actually starting to feel negative emotions at the table. One, that's when you start
Mm-hmm.
talking to the DM and figuring out where that's coming from. And two, I mean, I just said it, just identifying where those feelings are coming from and trying to work through it. Is there something in the campaign that's triggering you? Is there something that another
Mm-hmm.
player is doing that's triggering you? But I even think that there's healthy ways to solve that in game. Like other than like they're obviously talking about it. Talking about it is always the thing, but you never want these emotions to just keep boiling up and boiling up. I'll always remember, and again, I said sorry for a tangent and went on another tangent, but this is this is one of my favorite D&D stories that I love to tell people. And I actually don't know if I've told you this. If I have, I'm sorry, but if not, when I moved up to so I went and did my master's for the chat. I did my master's degree up in Washington, and I was born in Washington and spent a good chunk of my childhood in Washington, but by the time I'd moved back, I didn't really know anyone. And we were playing D&D online every once in a while, but Josh, shut up. We're not having any of that over here. But I was really missing playing D&D in person because we were playing on Roll20, but I wanted to roll my dice. I had just gotten some metal dice, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to go to a comic book shop. And I started playing, I cannot remember the name of the campaign, but it's essentially the Giant Dungeon campaign where all the campaign
Dungeon of
is
the
just
Mad
the
Mage.
Yes, that's the one. And so I created my player. I showed up. I showed up early so I could talk to the DM and just explain like what my character was and everything. And everybody was sitting around the table and it was normal. It seemed normal. And then literally the second the campaign starts, the sorcerer turns and he's like, so and so, the character's name, you have not been living up to your oath. And the God that is overseeing our world right now is not holding you to fulfill your oath. So I am leaving this party to make sure that I will find some adventure group that will stay loyal to their party. And the player closes his notebook, gets up from the table, and I never see him again. Like, like
Yeah.
I love that he low key left the campaign because the DM was not willing to like take action against him and like everyone was so confused except for this guy next to me who was just like, yeah, I saw this coming. So the moral
Yeah.
of the story is
Man.
you need to go to at least one comic book shop D&D session to
Yes.
see.
Yes. In the world of problem players in D&D, there's problem players and there's problem players. And to a certain extent, people like in your story, they're the easy kind. Like they make a good story, you post about it on Crit Crab, you make a YouTube video about it, you get some karma on Reddit. And then there's the ones where it's almost a good fit and you're just kind of unhappy for months and months and it gets worse. And I feel like that was the infamous like put up with it through 27 episodes kind of situation where it's subtle
Yeah.
enough where you're not going to quite do anything for a long time. I don't know. I've been really, I don't know if I should call it lucky, but I haven't had any of the like really egregious players where they're like, well, my dog man takes out his ginormous penis and like ... the sort of stuff like that where you could just be like, oh, you're a freak, get out of here. That sounds easy to me.
Yeah, and I think that we're very fortunate. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, our campaigns never had anything wrong where we had to have a conversation or anything. Because again, I think that we got ahead of things most of the time. I do think there was a couple times that you did have to sit us down and be like, hey, I know I mentioned this earlier, but hey, this is not an I'm not your enemy. Like I am here trying to make this
Mm-hmm.
game entertaining. And if you're over here like viewing me as like attacking you, it's not me being like, I hate you guys. It's I want you guys to struggle so that success is that much more satisfying. Or you were trying to get revenge from me when I was a personal trainer against you guys and just wanted to see me suffer. That could have been an option.
You subject me to physical pain, I subject you to emotional torture via your D&D character.
The laws of equivalent exchange.
In our groups, you know, when I was a player for you, when you were a player with me, when I was a player in Josh's campaign, when we were both players in Josh's campaigns, etc., you know, that's a good example of a group that's working, where you need to make style adjustments and you need to talk to people. You need to make sure it's working for everyone. And as long as those lines of communication are open and people are willing to use them, then you're going to have a great campaign. You're going to have a great time. You're going to make some memories. If people aren't talking about it, and if they're not being subtle about their problems, or if they are being subtle about the problems, then you end up with things that last a long time. And I think I've gotten better at noticing those, but not perfect. You know, even in my professionally run games, I've had situations where like players were not showing up with bad intentions or anything like that. They just had a very different style that wasn't jiving well. When they're paying me for a service, it's hard to say like, I don't like your role play, get out. You know, there are some these edge cases are where it's actually hard. And I don't know. I think that the online community doesn't actually appreciate that very much, how difficult it is to sort of socially engineer your group so that everybody becomes friends, which is what's necessary. Even with randos online, you need to make them into friends for this game to work out. Otherwise, somebody is going to annoy somebody else and it's all going to fall apart.
Yeah. I'm willing to, I want to tell this story again, just to reiterate like how to healthily handle these sort of situations. And because you guys know how the story sort of ends and that I am now best friends with this person, I actually had an issue with a campaign where I had a cursed weapon and it made it so I'd go a little crazy sometimes and just start killing party members. And if I ever even started attacking, Austin would cast Hold Person. To this day, I hate Hold Person with such a fiber to my being. If anybody casts Hold Person, I sort of go like blood in the waters for a shark, and I immediately go and target that person. I hate Hold Person. And it was cast on my barbarian Goliath every single battle situation. And especially I was sitting there like, okay, like, and I think I went and expressed this to you, Colby, like, hey, I hate this. Like, I have one thing that I'm good at, and I can't do it. And I think you did actually sit us all down and just be like, hey, this is a game. You guys can do what you want, but there is levels of player etiquette. You don't cast spells on your players that are not, unless they ask to. If you do think that it's a problem, what's going on, you talk it through in person. And again, all of you know that I love Austin. Austin is like one of my best friends, if not my best friend. So obviously we got over it, but words cannot describe how angry it would make when I would get, I'd roll initiative, I'd get one round in, I'd be raging, and then
So it's your tiny hut.
That is my tiny hut. Well, actually, last thing, and then we'll move on to chapter 2. Colby, I have discovered summon animals is the bane of my existence. Like, I have 2 druids in my party, and they both have summon animals, and they will cast summon animals every single fight session. I'm not convinced at this point they're doing it to make me angry, but I am now purposely having intelligent villains. So if they do cast it, like, all right, let's break concentration. Like, concentrate all firepower on the druids at this point.
Oh god, fuck that spell. Fuck it in its 2014 version. That is, it's a session killer. It takes all of the wind out of a combat because it trivializes things, and at the same time it slows things down to the point where it's boring while it's trivial. Which is why we changed it to be so. It's really weird now. In the 2024 version, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense how it works now, but it doesn't do what it used to, and thank God for that.
It still is terrible, but it's better. Just for everybody.
At least you don't have to track initiative for 18 wolves.
Oh my god. I am going to go ahead and drop in the meme section of our Discord a video that I spiritually relate to. Colby, I sent it to you directly, but there is a particular meme that I relate to more, and essentially, this is the you can watch it while while I'm doing the introduction of the chapter 2. But chapter 2, alliances and boiling points, episode 9, tentacles. The gnome research Tenacis and Numera's party appears. Mr. Tenacis' arrogance gets Kiki attacked by a tentacle monster. Senshi discovers tentacles pair well with vinegar, of course. Marcille refuses to leave, and Namari declines rejoining them. Underline is boiled alive and turned into a stew. Namari reveals Shoro's love for Fallon. Episode 10, Giant Frogs. Frog suits. Chilchuck discovers frogs block tentacum venom and allows them to get through a tentacle patch. Senshi makes tentacle pasta because why not? They reach the castle city, finding the orcs' abandoned stronghold. Tanashi reports to his lord, elves want the dungeon immortality spell. Laios realizes their party's weaknesses without Fallon, Namari, and Shoro. Dragon appears after Senshi's cooks the frog cutlets.
I mean, you just said some words.
I did. I said some words.
That's one of those like times where this is why we had a quote board, because some of this shit will just make you say sentences that will flabber your gast. That just came out of your mouth.
That is one thing I miss so much. I am going to implement. I have a whiteboard. I need to just implement. Guys, I cannot tell you the pride one would feel when you would get a quote on the quote board. I had more satisfaction getting a quote on the quote board than walking across the stage receiving my master's degree. Like, there was so much more satisfaction.
But yeah, what I was latching onto there is, like, we were talking about how do you get a character to feel interesting to play. You make them care about something, and if you want the lowest effort version of that, if you're a D&D player, if you're doing it for the very first time, this is so low effort, it takes no skill at all. Kiki and Kaka. You just talk to another player, be like, I want my character to be your character's twin. Let's make up silly names for them. And right away, Vex and Vax, Kiki and Kaka. Now you have two people who care about something, and that's as deep as you need to go. Yeah, that's Kiki and Kaka. We can't tell which is which. Right away, you've got you've given your game master something to pull on. It's perfect.
And they only talk when talked to. They don't start any conversations at all.
Yeah. those characters are the placeholders for the, like, this is my first time playing D&D and I'm here, guesting for 2 sessions. That's what those characters are. And I mean, you named them Kiki and Kaka, and I'm already in love.
It's funny you say that, because I was totally getting the vibes that they literally were placeholder characters, because it's almost as if it's the players that never show up, or they probably show up once every 4 sessions, and they're like, oh no, he was captured by the tentacle monster over there and is gonna be gone for the entire episode. Whoopsie! What are we gonna do? Like, that's what because I don't think we even see what the male twin, I don't even think he says anything in the entire show. Maybe he's like, let's go this way. And that's it.
I'm going to do the bad thing, and I'm going to tell a D&D story, which is
on this podcast.
You were talking about, like, no, I mean, like we're getting into it. But I had, in one of the first campaigns I ran professionally, we had somebody who showed up and he was like, I don't know if I'm going to play this for very long. He made a fighter and ended up playing with us for a long time. And he was like, I don't really like this fighter. I'm going to see if I can get him killed so that I can play something else. And that, just saying that, made that fighter pretty much the luckiest character I've ever seen. Just trying to get your character killed. He was like, fuck it, I'll jump out of this like 200-foot tall tree. Surely the fall damage will kill me. And I was like, I wasn't specifically trying to sink his plans, but it just wouldn't happen for him. So I feel like if this show continued on to like season 6, 7, like out there, I would want to see like a Kaka arc. I want to see what becomes of Kaka when the player behind him is addicted and he's just kind of stuck with this character at this point because it's integral to the story. And that happens so often. Like you get a throwaway character. Fucking Turmalk. I made up a kobold name and your fucking group decided to adopt this NPC that I was like looking around my spice rack and I'm like, turmeric? Turmalk! And stuck with the fucking thing for like months and months.
I completely forgot about it. Because why not?
You guys literally kidnapped a kobold, and you're just like, you're our mascot now. You're traveling with us, and she's like, I would really rather take care of my children. You're like, no, you're traveling with us.
But I'm the bad guy for mentally torturing a goblin. I see, guys. Just kidding.
Exactly.
It's the HR meme. That's what it is right now.
Yep.
I feel like in episode 9, once they make it above ground, this is when the show turns from like we're going on an adventure in our favorite rocket ship to like, okay, there is something going on here.
Yes.
There are stakes. There are plots. There is like, I think everyone can agree with me in this. Like, yes, we love Game of Thrones for the dragons. And yes, they have awesome fight scenes. But I think what especially the showrunners didn't realize in the later seasons, what made the show interesting was the Game of Thrones, the political, like Tyrion during season 2. Like, that's why I think season 2 is one of the best seasons, if not the best season, because you're seeing all the political intrigue going on, and we're starting to see the political intrigue going on in this. Like, you're like, oh, I didn't recognize you guys had this game in here. And like, I'm all about it. Like, I love the backstabbery. It's the games within games. It's the path to find immortality, like, and what people are willing to do. And this is the stuff that I really get fascinated by. Like, yes, I'm all about big guy with sword / monster, but this is what's interesting to me. And I'm excited to see where they go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you've done Game of Thrones on here, but like, I have felt all along that where that show went wrong is when they thought that the point was the like overturning expectations and big fantasy battles. And they did some cool stuff in those later seasons that I enjoyed, but it's kind of like the battles and the dragons, they were the frosting on the cake. And that's what everybody sees, and it's what's pretty. But it was good because it felt like it was part of a world. It felt like it was a part of a world that was real and dynamic, where people wanted things, and they lost that. And they tried to go formulaic, and they made a cake out of frosting, and then they were shocked that everyone thought it was disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and place for frosting cake, but
exactly
when you get 4 seasons of it, that's when it gets excessive.
Yes. Like, at some point, if you're eating the entire canister of frosting, you're depressed. It's a problem.
You only need to do it once. You do it every year. No, and and Nana, you're just cracking out too many bangers. I can't keep up with him, so I'm going to first do this one. Just going back. But
yes,
also,
give me a Kaka arc.
Everyone gets diabetes over here. But no, I really do agree, because, like, yes, Battle of the Bastards was awesome to watch. And seeing all the, like, keep saying, and everyone's probably sick of me saying this, my favorite fight scene of all time in Game of Thrones is the Field of Fire, where Daenerys comes down with her Dothraki screamers, and they're just taking out the Lannisters, and Dany is blasting. Like, it was one of the shortest fights, and it was in the shortest episode in season 7, but it just was so like, it was just straight sugar. It was not like there was not a gram of protein. There was not a gram. Like, that was just straight trans fats right there. Like,
yep.
But
you're not hitting your macros with that one.
You're not. And I loved it. But they took away, like, they made, like, I agree, yes, they butchered the Dorne arc in Game of Thrones, and that really, and Dorne had a lot of political intrigue going on, but the one crime that I think that they committed the most is they butchered Euron Greyjoy in the like, he is the one character I think got butchered harder than anybody in the series, because Euron is arguably one of the most fascinating characters in the show, and they made him a bro. Like, there's a time and place for a bro, but he's not a bro. He is a warlock who's trying to create a blood sea and marry Daenerys and claim a dragon and awaken, like, all these crazy things. And he's like, huh, I want to fuck Cersei. That's all I wanted this. Like,
Yep.
like,
Yeah.
they made him Victorian. Like, that's all they did. Not even Victorian was more interesting in the books than Euron was. Like, at least Victorian was like a traditional stupid Viking, like, oh, my brother fucked my wife, so it's my wife's fault and I had to kill her.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, speaking of creators not taking their source material seriously.
Yes.
They tried to boil it down to its essence so that they could make up their own and make up for the fact that they didn't have source material to go off of anymore. And it turns out that a story that you have been living in for a long time, boiled down to its essence, I mean, you can't live in something that's that simple.
Yes.
And so it feels shallow. It doesn't matter if the beats are exactly what George R.R. Martin said they should be, or, you know, it doesn't matter whether the CGI was good or bad. What matters is they took the life out of it.
Yes. And tying this back into Delicious and Dungeon.
Yes, we're getting some life. We're getting some world.
Yes. And they, like, yes, they still do the classic, like, every episode has a dish that they're presenting, and every episode has like a silly problem, but you can still have the silliness and have that cake underneath where things are starting to happen. And you could even argue, like, the next 2 episodes that we're going to be covering is almost strictly cake. It's not, there's hardly, there's a little bit of frosting, but it's mostly cake, and I'm all for the cake.
Yeah. I mean, it's all plot. And I found it actually really interesting that I was, you know, going through this and paying attention to how many dishes they showed. And there's fewer in this set of episodes because they don't have the time. They're building a world to have all of this take place in. And it's a little bit jarring. You know, if you were just binging this show, you're going to feel a difference when we go to this point where we're getting into the politics and the economics of dungeon delving. And if you weren't here with that sort of train of thought, then this show probably loses you at this point, because, you know, they start to go deeper and deeper into it.
Yes, just feel like we have to acknowledge this, Nana. We're all getting a well-rounded diet of D&D, Game of Thrones, and Delicious and Dungeon tonight. It is a well-rounded diet, and maybe a little bit extra more than you need. But like you said last time, Nana, you come for the tangents. You come for the dragons. You stay.
Whatever this food is, whatever this food is, it's very colorful and it's served in a trencher for some reason.
You've got burgers, you've got mac and cheese, you've got some potato chips, and for whatever reason, there's there's a battered shrimp. There is shrimp batter over here, like.
Yep, all of it on a trencher.
All with a fine glass of wine.
Or a horn of mead, if you prefer.
Exactly. I do find it ironic that typically, and they even tie into this episode a little bit, how they're like, oh, the arrogance of elves. I don't think I have seen a character more arrogant, more egotistical than this Mr. Sansa, the gnome. And I low-key love an arrogant gnome. Like they're like to me, it's like why are like elves? You at least have a reason to be arrogant. You're tall, you're beautiful, you have the gorgeous hair. Gnomes, they're short, they're not particularly good looking, and it doesn't seem like he's that. Like maybe he's got a high intelligence, but his wisdom certainly is not up there. Like why do
Uh-huh.
you have to be arrogant about over here?
Yeah, I found it a really interesting take on gnomes. They're kind of ugly. They're bulbous. They're arrogant. But they've also got they mention that like they live among the magic, which is kind of what the background of gnomes is in D&D and Pathfinder.
Yeah.
It's just D&D and Pathfinder at this point have given them all like purple or green hair, which I guess is what it takes to make something look good in D&D.
It doesn't hurt most of the time. I will say this. I wish we would have seen more of the stereotypical that they're tinkerers. Like I would have loved to see him like when they're eating, like him tinkering on something. But I also understand that that's just like too meta of a thing to be doing there. But that's the
Yeah.
only like critique that I'd have there. But I do again, like I love the fact that they have like this gnome being the asshole of the story, not the elf.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Time back into that bioessentialism conversation that we had
Yeah.
last time.
Yeah, exactly. Usually the gnome is not the bad guy. With the I guess there's a bad guy gnome in Kingmaker, the Pathfinder adventure path turned into a video game, which is worth your time. But anyway, there's an evil gnome in there, but it doesn't come up much. Gnomes
Yeah.
are generally just like cute and colorful and full of magic and little trinkets. And it really is interesting for them to be like the callous asshole who like literally lets somebody get shot in the head rather than face any danger himself.
Well, and not only
It's really
that,
fucked up.
but he seems to be the real mastermind behind this lord. Like the lord is clearly just like funding this entire excursion. But like when he was like, well, the lord was like, well, what do I tell the elves? They want their property back. And it's like, yes, I will come up with something that you can tell them over here, and then we will
Yeah.
discover. Like he's clearly the one. He's wearing the pants in this relationship over here.
Yeah. Yeah. That lord is a tool, clearly.
Yeah, he is literally just a bank account. Like that is
Mm-hmm.
what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really curious to see where this sort of relationship goes into more because it's just so interesting.
Well, and it's interesting to play with to a certain extent. So far, this show hasn't really had a villain. It has the
Yes.
dragon, but the show is doing its utmost to convince us that everything in the dungeon is just people, it's just animals. It might be magical, it might be weird, but they are not innately evil or anything like that. And we're finally seeing some aspect of like there could actually be somebody who means harm in this.
Before we like I want to actually dive really quick on that going back into D&D. Yes, this is a D&D podcast because we're talking about a D&D show. We have a professional DM on here. Yes. Throw the tomatoes.
Yes.
I will stand on this hill that I'm on. What is your thoughts? Like I low key like I'll be honest, in Critical Role, campaign 1 will always be my favorite. I know people will say campaign 2 is
Mm-hmm.
their favorite, but for me, I feel like I love seeing them to actually discovering their characters. And there's a level of like just it feels more natural. Like I'm not going to sit here and say that it's staged. I know it's not staged, but there's levels of like okay, I can see what people mean by being staged in campaign 2 and I think even more so in campaign 3. Again, I'm not a truther over here saying that it's staged, but in campaign 1 it's raw. It's like everyone is over here like discovering the game and it seems like when they get excited it's real enthusiasm. Well, there's a level of acting that's in campaign 2. But
Yes.
that being said, in camp, and I know this is a lot and I want you to break down your thoughts on all of it, but something I love in campaign 2 is there was an overarching villain that just kept popping up all
Yes.
throughout the campaign, which sorta did in campaign 1. Spoiler alert for anyone that hasn't done that. But Vecna sorta did it, but it wasn't as exciting as Ickathon, Trent and Ickathon was.
Yes.
in campaign 2, and it was just so much more satisfying when we actually got that final battle, and Liam's character made the decision. I'm blanking on his character in the game.
Yep. Me too.
Exactly. The wizard, the sad wizard.
Yeah.
But that's the point.
Caleb.
So what is your thought? Because I understand of like having like appropriate villains for the level, just because like you can't have level 1 heroes go and fight Trent Ickathon. But it's not exactly that fun to be like, all right, this is a Rocky montage for the next 6 years as you level up for to
Yeah.
go fight him. So
Yeah.
what would you say is your approach on that?
So I mean, obviously for D&D, it's a game about fighting monsters, and creating a story without a villain in those circumstances is real hard. And I don't know, I'm not sure like it's like the juice is worth the squeeze to a certain extent, because in the end this is supposed to be fun for the players. And if you go trying to be way too artistic and stuff. So anyway, I do stick with just like, there's a villain, there's a bad guy at the end of this campaign, that you're going to beat him, and that's how you know that you accomplished this campaign. And I kind of just take the approach that most Pathfinder campaigns, they call them adventure paths, do, which is like, the adventure path comes in 6 books, and each of those books kind of has its own villain. And so, book 1, you work your way up to the big boss, and in the process, you find out that the big boss has a big boss. And in book 2, you kill the big boss's big boss, who also has a bigger boss. And
It's a big boss pyramid
so there,
scheme.
to a certain extent, it's big bosses all the way down until you're fighting a god, and you're just fighting the very concept of like, I don't know, pick your god, pick your betrayer god. Do you want this one to be a fight against the concept of madness? That's basically one of my campaigns right now. That probably it's going to end up with a big fight against Tharizdun, but in the end, it will be more fun because of the little bosses along the way.
It's not about the final boss. It's all about the little
Yeah,
bosses we made around the
exactly. Well, and in another campaign right now, there has not been a big like knockdown drag out fight against any big villain, and I've been keeping things shadowy. And I don't know, my players can certainly get in the comments and tell me if this has not worked. I left things very nebulous, partly because I didn't want to write myself into a corner and decide that this campaign is about Asmodeus or something like that.
Yes.
And to give time for the players to give me things that could become that. And that worked out for me, because I handed one of the player characters a vestige of divergence, but one of the evil ones. And I let him get slowly corrupted by it, and so it's actually going to be a former player character that's the big boss, and that's no spoiler for any of them at this point.
I was going to say,
they know.
spoiler alert.
But yeah, at this point, the mystery is what he's doing and why and how and stuff like that. But in that campaign, I kind of left things very unconstructed, and I kind of threw shit at the wall. And it has ended up working. I have at least not sensed any discontent in how that has worked out. So if you're thinking of just starting a campaign and you're worried about like, can I come up with a boss that's satisfying enough? Don't try. Just start with a mini boss, start running the game. Your players will do shit that will give you opportunities, and you just need to take one of those opportunities that they hand you. A big boss in this campaign is just a player character somebody didn't want to play anymore, plus a problem that I set in front of them that they couldn't figure out, and that's it.
I've been having thoughts, and like I'm taking what you're saying there and I'm trying to apply it, because I think, how did Matt Mercer do it all? But like, I'm recognizing like he essentially had it that Trent was tied in almost in all the stories. Like everything that was negative, he had like a little grasp in. And so it like in the early campaign, it wasn't like, oh, he's the big bad villain. It's like, oh, he's an asshole, except for Caleb. Caleb's was his name. Caleb knew what was going on, but everyone else was like, oh, he's just a stuck-up wizard. Like, he's an ass, but like he's a government official. But it's slowly morphed into something more. And I'm trying so hard not to make this a Stormlight Archives podcast because I know that I could very easily do. But I am not joking when I say, again, I don't want to go into details because I know there are people in the chat that are going to talk about like haven't read it. But the current odium, like I'll just say that the current odium might be my favorite villain in a book of all time. Like I love everything he is as a villain, and at the same time, like yes, he is completely evil, but he's like a Magneto evil where you're like, I almost understand where you're coming from.
Yes.
Like you're almost borderline sympathetic, but at the same time, hey Nana, yes, you're getting Stormlight for dessert and you're gonna like it. But it's the same idea. Like he was in each and every, I don't want to spoil it, this person was in the books every single time, and you see him twitching and like everything all along the way. And then when you do finally get to literally the mountaintop of the arc, it's just that much more satisfying, and he's finding new and creative ways.
He's been building the Stormlight Archive since he was like in high school, and that's what you get when you have somebody who is obsessive enough to tinker with something that long and isn't in a hurry to shove it out into the world and just keeps cooking it. I mean, it's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. I love him as an author. I love him as teacher of writing. I think he has given me some fantastic advice, and also I could not be more different from him in every single aspect of my style of storytelling. I just don't have the attention to come up with a villain, introduce them at level 1, and somehow not spoil it. Because there's so many ways that you can fuck that up.
There's so many times, like, and again, like, I don't want to, like, there are people in the chat that haven't read the Stormlight Archives or The Way of Kings. First of all, what the fuck are you doing? Read it. Like, read it now. It's easily one of the greatest. I'm not joking. It's probably my favorite series, and I can't wait for when it's the animated show. But not to get back into that conversation. But every single time that the villain levels up, you're like that's the most interesting part of this, like in the books. Like there are several moments. I know that there's one in particular, like this one's not a spoiler too much, but when Dalinar first meets Odium, like in book 3, that's like one of my like what like what is going on right now? And Sanderson, I feel like, has mastered the what the fuck is going on right now. That's like what I really want to like get down. And I actually have a quote, and I'm probably going to butcher the exact quote. I have it written on my whiteboard that I have outside, and because somebody asked him on his podcast what his favorite video game was, and he's like, I really like, I think he was saying that he liked Elden Ring, or there was something, but he just was like, I really don't play a lot of video games. And he said, like, I have worlds I'm discovering, and if I am playing video games, I'm not going to be discovering that world. And that just hit home so hard to me, especially where I am trying to write a fantasy novel. And I'll be like, I just want to go play Total War Warhammer tonight. But then I'll be like, if I'm playing that, like this world that I am building is going to stay undiscovered. And like that quote alone has motivated me to get to the point. So I'm only 7 years off from finishing the book that I'm writing right now.
I know, right? And then you find out about the problems that come from limited linear time and the number of hours in the day.
Who needs sleep? Who needs sleep? But before we get off this rail too far, do we want to cover chapter 3 over here? Do you have any final thoughts on just that section of our conversation?
I would say, and this actually does come back to the show we're actually talking about, which is
what show?
The problem of villains. I know, what show? What's this even about anymore? But the problem of villains, and I think we're working up to villain number 1 in this talk we're having right now, and I haven't actually still finished the entire show, so I don't know if we get to villain number 2 at any point. But like, this show is, I think, if you took these first few episodes, or the first 12 episodes in isolation, the dragon wouldn't feel like a good villain. It would feel like a poorly executed villain, despite the fact that they gave it a full 2 episodes, despite the fact that they had to sacrifice to beat it. But it still almost feels like the Kraken again, where, okay, well, it's got that one weak spot, and it's going to come down to how do we get a sharp thing into that weak spot. And like, if you're trying to make your own stories, that, you know, the villain having one weak spot is a great way to wrap things up and make it feel like, you know, your characters are actually in danger because there's only this one weak spot and it's really hard to get to and stuff like that. And also to let you have a villain that's essentially invincible until it's not. But to me, it's almost an overused trope. You know, it's a trope that goes back to Tolkien. You know, the Smaug with his one missing scale, and we need to put a sharp thing through that one missing spot, or that one soft spot on the bottom of the dragon. I think it's just a trope that I personally don't love, because partly how it affects me in my real life, because people come to D&D expecting that experience and expecting a monster to have a weak spot to find. And I have to be like, sorry, this game is actually built around dealing damage for 5 rounds until I say that it's finally dead. And I don't know, it's to me, it's a way to set up a villain to be underwhelming, to give them this like Achilles heel.
Yeah, I know, and especially we'll be covering in the next chapter. We have been getting, I think, at least sprinkles of what the final villain is, and I'm excited to dive into that. But chapter 3, Dragonfire and Desperation. Episodes 11 and 12 are Red Dragon 1 and Red Dragon 2. Episode 11. The dragon fight goes horribly wrong. Laios drops the pot shield. His sword abandons him. Senshi's axe breaks. Chilchuck blinds the dragon, but Kensku is thrown to Laios after he drops it, who kills the dragon but loses a leg in the process. Laios remembers Fallon's ghost talking ability while he is having a near-death experience. They carve open the dragon only to find Fallon's skeleton remains. Episode 12. Marcille performs forbidden ancient black magic to resurrect Fallon. Fallon returns, is confused, but alive. The dragon explodes thanks to a fire breath fuel, but Fallon saves everyone, and Senshi cooks dragon soup, pizza, and steak, because a victory meal is a must, if we learned anything from One Piece. As the episode wraps up, an elf is looking over the Fordham magic ritual with a look of anger and a disgust over that. I feel like we just need to get this part out of the way. I love how they depict a plan to fight a big bad villain just going completely out the window after round 1. Like, to this day, I don't think I have ever seen or been part of an execution plan that actually went to plan. Again, I know we just talked Joe Abercrombie, but I feel like the mercenary group that the Bloody Nine used to be a part of, demonstrate that perfectly, where they map out a plan, but they always forget a key component that makes the entire plan fall apart. They still do it, but at the end they're like, you were supposed to do this. You're like, well, you were supposed to do it.
As a big last villain, is this, you know, dragon end up feeling a little underwhelming compared to others in media? Maybe a little bit. As an encapsulation of what it's like to play in or run a D&D boss battle, perfect. It was perfect. No notes.
Well, because, again, I know you can relate to this, but you've seen players just try to be like, in the back of my head, I'm like, okay, if you just fight them, yes, you need to have a strategy, but if you just fight them, you don't even have to think outside the box. You can beat this guy. You have the level. But I don't know what it is about players, but players always assume that they're 5 levels under being able to handle this boss. So they're like, okay, what we're going to do, we're going to hold the bowl, and the bowl is going to reflect the fire against the dragon, and then we're going to lead it and collapse a building onto the dragon. They're like, just attack it. Just have some cover.
Yes, that's so real. have reasonably simple plan without too many moving parts. This is actually a it's a thing in D&D that you spend an entire session planning an elaborate trap that is going to trivialize this encounter. The entire time the DM is just sitting there like, wow, you've all forgotten that, like, you have water walk or something like that. Like, you have all forgotten the thing that you have that solves all of this.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna remind you of it real quick. When that combat starts, I'm gonna remind you of the thing that you forgot about. I mean, that's kind of the magic, honestly, of D&D, as opposed to, dungeon crawl board games like oh, what's it called? Oh, I'm blanking on it. Betrayal on House on the Hill, and
Yeah.
like the D&D board games that came out and are kind of based on 4th edition and stuff like that, where it's just you versus a stat block. The magic is that you've got another mind who is thinking about this situation and who may or may not miss the thing that you missed, or think of the thing that you missed. I mean, that's where the famous tiny hut incident comes about, and why I like my wife will not play a character who takes that spell to this day, because there was an elaborate plan, and it was a great plan, and it would short circuit everything. And then I was like, yeah, but the baddies are going to react to you, and they're going to do things you don't expect. And if your plan depends on them doing what you expect, then things are going to go wrong.
Is it a particular session that I'm recalling that I was involved in?
Yes. Yes.
I Colby, I'll just say this. I'm impressed you're still alive. I'll just say that. I remember Cool Bear being so mad at you for that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, to the point where there's like D&D lists of like, what are the best spells to take and like the most powerful and game-breaking spells. Tiny Hut is always on that list. It's a fantastic spell, but it's one of those situations where you were relying on it to do a thing that the enemies could deal with. I'm also impressed that I'm still alive after bringing it up multiple times over the years. She's not even glaring at me right now.
Not yet. Just kidding.
Not yet.
Love you, Cool Bear. One thing I also just sort of want to bring up when it comes to just these fights going wrong, like, yes, I do have to acknowledge what Nana Vagar is saying in the chat. One does not simply attack a dragon. Absolutely correct. You're right. Yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, like, I feel like I'm going to share, like, if I can get the comic of it, I will drop it in the chat. But my party was on their way to go fight this frost giant in the campaign. And there was a bridge that they had to cross. Colby, and again, I know you can relate to this, and several people can relate to this. It was just a bridge. Nothing wrong with the bridge. Yep. It wasn't even like a trap. They sat, I shit you not, for an hour and a half, just discussing that. I was just, it's a bridge. And the problem is they kept rolling, because like, can we make an investigation check? Like, sure. And they would roll like a 2. They're like, I'm going to roll an investigation check. All right. It's a 4. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a bridge. It's a bridge, guys. I swear, it's a bridge. Because I'm even telling them, like, it's a bridge. And they're like, no, we're rolling way too low. Something is wrong with it. And they started like trying to come up with plans on how to get across this. And I'm just like, guys, it's just like, I obviously can't say that, but I'm just sitting there like low key losing my mind until finally the barbarian. Look, this is why we need barbarians. This is the reason we keep barbarians. They're like, all right, I'm just gonna walk across. And I'm like, and he walks across, and I'm like, yeah, you walk across. And they're like, wait, what? There's nothing wrong with it. And I'm like, no, there's nothing wrong with it. There's not.
Yeah, there's a fantastic clip of the cast of the Dimension 20, their magic school. Anyway, the cast all talking about kind of this idea, and Brennan Lee Mulligan at some point says like, use emphasis as a tool, and when you're introducing a room, you say like, oh yeah, there's some dusty bookshelves and there's a table over there with a washstand on it and a mysterious looking sword propped against the wall in the corner. And they're having this talk over essentially Skype or something. And because it's his players and because they do this, they're like, I want to investigate all of the books. How musty is it actually? And it is such a real thing because you use emphasis to say, this is what's important, and to try not to waste time and try to keep it fun and moving quickly. And you don't want to break the immersion by saying, it's just a book, leave it alone. And honestly, like if you've got the time and the energy and the improv chops, or if you're running a game that makes improv easier than it is in 5th edition, you don't have to find stat blocks and all of that stuff, then the real big brain move is, you think there's something wrong with that book on that shelf? Well, now there is. It's the new campaign. This is the new big bad. You've decided that there's something wrong with that book. Now there is. And you're about to find out for me exactly what's wrong with that book.
It's the classic meme of, you're like, all right, is you walk past a warehouse and they're like, a warehouse? Is that like a demonic house?
Yeah.
And it's like DM frantically writing stats like, well, now it is.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
I did genuinely enjoy like everything in this fight, and I want your thoughts on this specifically when it comes to the sword, because at first I'm like, it's so stupid that it's like it's trying to add intensity levels to it, where it's like, oh, it's not working because it's scared of the dragon. Like, yeah, sure, great. But like the more and more I thought about it, like this technically is a magical weapon for Laios, and it's been only a positive, and there's not really been any drawbacks to it. And this is almost like a logical drawback, like where it's like, okay, this sword has been able to warn them whenever there's anything coming and they're able to defend themselves. So like the flip side of it is like, okay, since it's able to sense other monsters, it can sense the power level of this monster and be like, huh, fuck that, I'm not.
Yeah, turns out your sword is a coward. Sorry. Yeah, I actually really I've watched that episode twice now, and I think I had your same response. The first time I was like, what the fuck? This is like, that is kind of, it felt cheap the first time around. And then I realized that no, what they're doing is they're saying this isn't just a sword, it's a character. I don't know if they had more runtime to work with or something like that. Maybe they could have planted a seed of, maybe this sword won't always be 100% reliable. And so I think to a certain extent it is a little jarring because it comes out of nowhere. But that's the only criticism I have of it. I think that it's an excellent idea. I think that sword is rapidly becoming one of my favorite characters, especially when Laios later on reveals what's going on with it to his sister, and it pops its little arms out, and she's like talking about eating it, and it's like this is my favorite character now. It's a sword.
It's so relatable too, like, because I feel like almost every single D&D campaign, the players find a monster and they're like, Dad, can we keep it? Can we keep the monster?
Yeah. Well, and at the same time, it's a chance for the writer / the DM to remind you that the main characters are badasses. That idea is planted a number of times during the earlier episodes, how easily they handle the mushroom people and, all of those lower level things. They're clearly showing you that these are easy for them to defeat. And, this is an issue you end up with D&D campaigns as well, especially 5th edition D&D, where you get into those higher levels and nobody feels vulnerable anymore. And planting a character, or even just like a pseudo character, like a sword that can kind of emote, is a way for you to signal danger, where everybody's gotten used to playing their characters like they don't give a shit anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of my big criticisms of Curse of Strahd, is that the style of the system doesn't lend itself well to horror, because 5th edition isn't very good at making you feel like your character's really at risk. Unless you're at like level 1 through 3, in which case your character's really at risk and you know it. But like when it's finally time to face Strahd, it's not scary because I mean, there's so many conversations to have about, like, you can make Strahd scary, you can buff him up. Even if you just play him in a really optimized way, he is an unbeatable villain, but that's not very fun. So he has to be beatable to some extent. And you're going to have player characters who have gone through all this stuff, who have solved all of these problems and slain every kind of like gothic horror monster. And so they're going to walk into Castle Ravenloft and be like, get the fuck down here, Strahd, it's time to kick your ass. And so it doesn't work in terms of delivering horror, but you know, in terms of like a tactical fight, it can deliver that.
No, that's the one thing that I always think back on. Like when we played Curse of Strahd, like it really was, I don't want to say anticlimactic because there was like a level of like, I saw how you guys were like celebrating afterwards, but I was expecting it to be a lot more down to the wire. I was expecting it to be a lot more like when, again, not to reference Critical Role so much, but when they were fighting the second time they fought the Briarwoods after Vecna
Yeah.
revived them, like that to me, that's what a final boss fight should feel like, where there's
Yes.
just death everywhere. There's victories going on, but it's bloodied victories. And again, that's why my players hate me, because I when it comes to these boss fights, I'm trying to kill
Yeah.
them. And
Yes.
I'm so excited to be at level 7 with my players because I can start actually having intelligent villains, which is so much fun.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I love that shift from like, okay, it's kobolds and they're all cowards, to no, this thing knows your powers. Not just that, it's not just like this thing knows what a barbarian is and how to like throw something that requires wisdom at the barbarian. That's like one level of thinking. No, this villain has researched you and knows how to counter every one of your favorite moves as a party. That is genuinely a lot of fun. And I think, like, again, it's such a weird dichotomy. It's such a weird situation to be in, to be a DM, where you're supposed to be putting challenges in front of your players that look scarier than they are,
Yes.
and that can be overcome, because if you don't do that, you're not going to have players for long. If you put, you know, if you force them to stay at level 1 and you put a Tarrasque in front of them, of course there's no chance. And that's not fun. What is fun is a victory that costs something. And I think that's something that this, you know, the dragon fight did well. You know, it cost pain. It cost a leg. And even if we don't want to dwell on Laios being an amputee now, which I think that there's a time and a place to leave that in your D&D campaign. Have a character lose a leg and see what it's like living in a Renaissance world that way. Or make a new quest to try and find a clockwork replacement or something like that.
Yes.
There's interesting places to go with that. If you just curb stomp the dragon, then everybody, game master and players, are all left like, huh, well, what now?
It's like,
That
cool.
kind of wasn't that awesome. Yeah, cool. Well, we killed that thing. Yeah, and so I really do feel like this is another great example of, you know, the upsides and downsides. They talk about the inverse scale, the Achilles heel of this terrifying monster that cannot be harmed in any normal way, at least by them, at least by this party. But giving it that kind of weakness at least gives you a situation where you can say, no, there's a way you can do this, but it's going to cost you. And then you get an interesting story. I
Yes.
don't think 5e is very good at like forcing players and game masters to do that. That kind of ends up being kind of a pro move and stuff like that. I certainly don't even do that all the time, but it's I don't know. I do appreciate how not only does it cost something, but you almost have a turn in the energy of the series
Yes.
when they finally do kill the dragon, and when they're finally, I mean, it's kind of a weird episode, isn't
It
it?
is.
Because you have this climactic fight and you want to be like, yeah, and then they find a piece of hair in its stomach. You're like, boy, they
Yeah,
have just bought themselves much more trouble.
it literally ends with Laios holding the skull of his sister. Like, how much more metal
Yeah.
and dark do you get than that?
Yeah. Well, and even just the I guess I try to call it a shot, but it's anime. But anyway, the view of like looking out through the eye holes at Laios's face,
Yes.
fucking metal. That
Yeah.
really tells you what the energy is going to be here on out.
No, I've loved everything that you just did with that, and it actually you're kickstarting sort of a conversation that I want to have. But there, you brought up something that I also really want to dive into real quickly that has the potential to completely derail the conversation, as our conversations typically do. But
As everything does.
I feel like 5e does a very poor job of like having severe consequential injuries.
Yes.
Because like I personally, and maybe this is just one of those things that need to be covered more in like a session 0, but I love having the potential to lose a limb, to lose an appendage, to lose like going blind. I mean, to this day, like I will always remember when my paladin Brant cut off his own hand just because like I had lost my powers because I wasn't fulfilling to it. And it was one of those things where I just was in the mode and I just saw how everyone reacted at the table. But like I could make the argument that it probably was one of the most like, obviously like ability wise it changed my player forever, but like how I played my character, like personality wise, like role playing wise, it was probably the single most like changing factor of like, okay, no, like I'm not actually taking this character seriously. And I just feel like 5e does not set you up though for these sort of life changing things that are going on, which again, I understand why. It's not fun to be in the middle of a boss fight and you lose a leg and you're like, okay, well, you're now one leg Jack. Like what? So what's
Yeah.
your thoughts on that?
Or yeah. Or if it is fun, it's not fun for enough people for Wizards of the Coast's board, you know?
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite TTRPGs right now, and it, you know, if I could just replace all 5e with it, I kind of would, is Dragonbane right here. And you know, it's a fairly simple, it's a simpler system, it's faster to run, that's already nice. It keeps characters feeling very vulnerable even as they get more power because you don't get more hit points. You start out with 18 hit points, you have 18 hit points all the way through. But
I'd hate that.
one of the optional rules it has is anytime your character hits 0 hit points and starts doing death saves, which are almost the same as 5e, once you're healed, after the fight is over, then you roll essentially a constitution save. If you fail that roll, then you roll on a table to find out what roll, or choose on a table to find out what major injury you've ended up with. And I've used that specifically. I've used that twice because I've run the campaign that comes in this box twice, and the very first encounter in that campaign wiped both parties. Both times I ran it because everybody expects it to be 5e and then you get massacred by 3 goblins. But you can use that to be like, okay, yeah, you just wiped. Are the consequences that you now have to roll up new characters? That's kind of the assumption, but what I prefer to do is, no, I'm going to let these characters keep living, but it's going to cost them something. So we rolled on that table for each of them. Some of them lost toes and couldn't walk right. So one of them, whose specific character flaw was that they were very vain, got a big ugly scar across his face, which just gives you great moments. And we were playing this campaign a little bit more like fun and easygoing and casual. But at the same time, I think what we're getting at here is 5e is short on consequences.
Yes.
And I think that consequences are part of the thing that gets people really hooked on TTRPGs in general, which is like, number one, I can do anything. And number two, anything I do will have real consequences that make some sense. I mean, that's the entire formula for every TTRPG. And if it's not doing part of that, then people are going to get bored.
Yes.
If there's essentially no way for you to fail or for your character to be changed by a success or a failure, it's going to get boring.
I feel like this is actually a good segue into my second thing that I was going to mention that I really like and appreciate about this episode. I feel like this episode depicts one, resurrection, and two, healing in the most, like, I want to emulate this in a D&D session rather than like what it is. Like, they make it so like you are healing, like it's causing the players, the adventurers, significant pain to heal from their wounds. Like essentially, like all their bones are being put back into place. And that's sort of how I imagine it. I can't, like, I have to imagine that healing spells, like everyone depicts like healing spells as like, oh, it's nice and soothing. And I'm like, no, it's probably like a field medic sort of situation where you're like popping it back into place real quick. You're jabbing yourself with adrenaline. You're like, all right, get back in there, son. I heard no bell.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Again, they're taking it seriously when other properties kind of don't.
Yeah. And then the resurrection portion, like I actually love how dark and sinister it actually was, because like, yes, clerics are sort of tied to like this and it's supposed to be this holy, but if, like, again, we talked about this last week, if you really think about resurrection spells, like, yes, it's tied to clerics, but what's more what's borderline satanic, like borderline like evil than defying a law of nature? Like death is arguably one of the most like final things. You are defying one of the most final laws out there, defying all things that rely on that. And what would it take to do that? Like, to me, yes, you can make the argument of holy magic, but to me, I also think like it takes undermining death, undermining that level of darkness. So when they did like that whole blood dark magic, I was like, I want this to be healing magic. I'd even go a step further. I would almost argue that like warlocks should be like the healers, or like the like maybe not the healers, but those that resurrect people rather than warlocks and necromancers. Like I almost want to like, again, if I had a magic wand, I'd make it that clerics, they can heal, they can cast protection spells, but once it comes to death is final. Like they can't do it. But the necromancer, the warlocks, these ones that are just that, like, you know, where they're getting their magic is unholy and unnatural. I want that to be the resurrection spells, because that just, it makes sense.
Yeah, it is literally toying with things that shouldn't change. And even, you know, the show mentions this, like, this is a special feature of this dungeon, even, that resurrection is so common. And outside, you know, this isn't something that anyone would put themselves through. I mean, yeah, you think of resurrection or major healing, and there's no way to think about that happening to an actual human body that doesn't sound absolutely horrific, especially if you're conscious for it. Like, regrowing nerves, that shit hurts. And like, that can come into play with a little cut. Chilchuck gets a knock on the head. He's probably severely concussed. He's got brain damage. And so what's this healing magic doing? It's rearranging neural pathways. That's not gonna feel good.
No, not at all. Like, I low-key loved it when Marcille was coming in and it was just zooming in on Senshi's eyes and just the pure terror. And he's like, oh, no, I'll heal. Let me heal on my own, please.
It's like, nope, I'm good. I love Senshi's terror of magic in general, and this is the place where it made the most sense, where it wasn't just a character quirk. He's like, no, this is why I hate this shit. You do unnatural things. I'm not okay with it. Yeah, and I think that I think that the prevalence of like Revivify being a 3rd level spell, you're what, level 5 when you get that? That's kind of the beginning of the main section of any major D&D campaign, when you get the ability to literally, you know, bring someone back to life. And there's limitations and whatnot. There's limitations to all of the spells to kind of balance them out. But I feel like it would all be in many ways more interesting if not if that magic didn't exist, but more if again you had to pay a real price for it. And it does kind of ring a little hollow, just especially when you get really kind of tactics first players or groups. I've seen groups that are like, "Oh no, don't revivify him yet. You'll waste a spell. We need to like wait until the boss is at a lower state in health." Or groups that have this tactic of like, "Oh, don't use healing word on people who are alive. Wait for them to go down because that is a bigger benefit than just 4 more hit points." But if you think about it in real life, if that friend and you're saying, "Oh no, don't heal him until he's literally knocked unconscious." And then what's it going to feel like if you normally have 75 hit points and you're brought back at 3 hit points? What's it going to feel like for you when you're brought back at 3 hit points? You're probably going to wish that you were unconscious again. Well, yeah, no, I think it's things like that introduce just tiny little amounts of like cognitive dissonance that make it hard to get into a story like this. And people are used to working around that and duct taping it, but I don't know. I wish it could be different.
Yeah. I know I talked about it a little bit last time we had the conversation, but I almost had a TPK with my party. And there was at one point where Kimmy's druid was down and our barbarian was down, and the party's cleric is partner was the barbarian, and she only had 1 revivify left. And so, well, actually no, so the barbarian was dead and Kimmy had just failed 2 death saving throws. And so she's just sitting there like, okay, what do I do? Do I revivify him now? Or is it possible that we lose if I don't revivify? Because I think Kimmy might have revivify. I don't know. I should probably look at the spells. But do you revivify the druid who'd be able to help out more? And like I could just see the physical pain on and again, I love this shit. I love seeing the pain on my player's face, having to make these decisions on who to save. Like choose who you're going to do. I don't know why my players don't like combat with me. It's really, I don't understand. But no, but it's one of those things where I genuinely like, this is when the game feels real. Like it feels, and it's also like, again, tying back into these situations, there's consequences. Like this is one of the few times where I'm like, okay, I see the vision that 5e is trying to do. Like, yes, it's become boardroom, it's become corporate, but when you're in these situations, you have a level 6 cleric who literally has to decide, do I revivify the tank or do I revivify the half tank, half healer? And it's just these like, and it's one of those things where I typically allow a little level of metagaming, but I'll sometimes I'll be like, hey, what's your decision? What's your decision? And I'll just keep saying that until like they make a decision, because like I want them to feel that level of stress at the table. And again, I love my players.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to a certain extent, having a more crunchy tactical game where combat takes a while, it does give you a lot of tools to create those situations. In some ways, it's easier, and in some ways, it's harder. It gives you time to engineer the situation. It also gives the players a lot of tools to engineer their way out of your carefully engineered situation. And so, sometimes that kind of stuff works out. And you're right, it's fantastic when people are like, my God, do we resurrect the one who could win this battle or the one who could resurrect the rest of us?
Yes.
What's the better choice here? And very seldom do you really get that organically. Sometimes you can cheat your way into it, but then if the players see your hand or see your thumb on the scale, then, it's less fun that way. It feels like an engineered situation as opposed to, oh my God, this is the most tense situation I've ever seen, and it just happened because some dice said so,
The dice god spoke.
Yeah, when the dice want to tell a story, that's when it gets really magical.
The dice tell the best stories sometimes.
They really do. They really do. Some of my My most important story beats and moments in some of my campaigns came about because I rolled a crit and basically killed a character and then just watched the reverberations through the rest of the campaign.
Well, yeah, again, we could talk this way for the rest of this
Yeah.
podcast, but I did just want
Oh,
to,
yeah.
just on the final thoughts on these two episodes, do you have any final thoughts concerning them?
Mm-hmm.
I do like how we're setting up this petition. Like, I don't want, like, I feel like I'm partially spoiled. We do, like, they clearly put an emphasis on this elf. We saw the elf in the previous 6 episode season when it was in the flashback. They're clearly like trying to hint that this is the big bad, but I just wish that they would have done a better job at, like, yes, they've hinted it, like we've said where other
Mm-hmm.
campaigns have hinted, or other campaigns, but other shows. But I feel like they could have done a better job of actually hinting that this is the
Yeah.
villain rather than like, oh, that's a picture of them right there. Oh, they're in the living picture. Why is she standing above the death circle? What's that about? Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think that I was watching these 2 episodes and I was like, oh, that's something they're planting. That was a plant and that's going to come back later. You know, telling stories for a living, you get used to doing that yourself, you know, planting a detail and you know, doing that little like, please nobody notice this other than to remember that I said it. That's when it's really working well. Like when somebody writes down that this happened, but they don't care. That's when it's working well. And I think they did that with Fallon when they've resurrected Fallon and they're going to rest in this giant house and she's like talking to people who aren't there. I'm like, oh, you just planted something. That right there is an omen that not everything is okay. I agree that the elf, the short silver-haired purple-eyed elf, um I've watched this show about as far as episode 16 or so, and I know where they're going with that character. But if you stopped at this point, you would have no reason to think that that is what is happening. That they're setting up a villain. It doesn't
yes.
feel like an omen of incoming doom or anything like that. It just feels like somebody who knows more than the characters, which I don't know. It's not as impactful.
Yeah, you can tell that this character is clearly disapproves of what Marcille does. And like that can definitely be an interesting storyline in and of itself. It's sort of funny. I think we both sort of stopped at the same spot. Like we did not plan this, guys. This was not planned. Genuinely, that's like where I stopped watching it as well. Since I started picking up another show. But like both get the sense like, yes, this is a villain, and I'm excited to see the direction, but I'm a little nervous that they're going to try to go too deep into the holier than thou villain, which, yes, there's a time and place
Mm-hmm.
for the holier than thou villain, but it's probably one of my least favorite archetypes for a villain. I don't know if what your opinion necessary is on that. I'd much rather
Yeah.
have like I know what I'm doing is wrong, but I like it's for the greater good villain, then I'm better than like I know what I'm doing is right.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's kind of like everybody's looking for the Magneto villain, or I forget the actual name of the character, but the villain from the first Black Panther film. Um, you know, those are really well set up, likable villains. Not only likable, not only charismatic. I mean, cast Tim Curry, you've got charismatic and villain all in one. But to make a villain that the audience almost agrees with more than the protagonists is a really cool place to
Yes.
be in, where you can start picking at some really interesting and nuanced ideas. Like, hey, is this superhero really in the right here? I think Black Panther did a fantastic job of that. I think X-Men has a long history of doing a fantastic job of that. because X-Men was
Yes.
written with these nuanced ideas of what is good and evil, and how should people be with each other, etc. I don't know. I almost feel like they're trying to do that with this elf, and the elf isn't likable enough. And maybe they're right, but if they're not likable, I don't know. I think that hasn't been set up to my like expectations. There's plenty of episodes for them to change my mind on that. We'll just have to see.
They've done a great job so far. Yeah, they've done a great job so far. So I'm excited to see the direction they actually end up going with this, because there still is time. But I think we're both very much on the same page. If they've just done not a well job on executing the initial introduction of this big bad, which again, I feel like we've glazed this show up enough that we have the right to be dishing out some
Yes,
critical critiques on it.
exactly. Yeah, so like you should watch this show if you're a fantasy fan, a D&D fan, etc. But it doesn't make it perfect.
Exactly. Exactly. But I'm ready to do our dragon grade if you're ready, Colby, unless you have any final thoughts on the episode,
Hell yeah.
on the shows, and just the
Let's
show
go
chunk
for
and
it.
jabber.
No, I think let's grade a dragon.
All righty. Well, we are here on the dragon grade. Each week we do a grade for our dragon when we have a dragon to grade. We have 5 categories that we grade our dragon in. We have a category in design. We have a category in special effects, character, film, and X Factor. We grade the dragon on a scale of 0 to 10. 0 being abysmal, 10 being incredible, and 5 being okay. We're going to switch things up a little bit. I know you guys want to know what Colby wants, but we're going to drum up the surprise a little bit. Let you just marinate in that, what Colby is deciding. Well, I come out and explain to you why I graded my dragon accordingly. I do not mind the design of this dragon. Like, it's big, it's clearly a big dragon, and everyone knows how I love my big, thick dragons, my big, thick boys over here. Like, I love just how massive and how imposing it is. I love, like, a lot of just the character elements. When it has the body type of a European dragon, I need wings. Like, I really need those wings.
Mhm.
And that's where it sort of hits, like, gets a little bit like, at first I was really just watching, like, what is it about this dragon that's just not clicking for me? And I realized it doesn't have those wings. Now, it makes sense. They're underground, they're in a dungeon. It doesn't really make too much sense to have wings. But for even aesthetic purposes, it needed to have wings. So on that, I gave it a 7, which translates to very good, but it would have scored better if it actually had wings.
Honestly, I didn't notice it didn't have wings, and you're making me rethink things here. But I absolutely agree. I think that, you know, a dragon that is so clearly shaped like every other dragon, and it's meant to be very, very, you know, they're not trying to reinvent the wheel here by any means. For it to not have wings, I'll say that it's strange that I didn't notice it, but I agree that that's kind of a shortfall. And I think I would put a 6 on design. I'd call that good because I like how they're doing, you know, with every monster, they're giving it a biology. And I appreciate that. That is what lifts this dragon up for me. A fairly basic design is doesn't have to be a factor for me. But as I said, I do find myself sometimes being a little annoyed with like the one spot where if you stab this, the thing just dies instantly. And it being like one little triangle right here. And if you get a blade, literally, like if this were to scale, it would be like an inch long toothpick stabbed up. That would hurt. Your tongue wouldn't work quite right. But that's not an instant death. So I think that's just the tiniest bit lazy. You know, you could give it an Achilles heel that's somewhere else and you know, maybe set off its fire sac or something like that and give it a reason to die instantly when you stab that thing. So that's why I give it a 6 on design.
No, I completely agree on that front. And I actually I will go ahead and say that I think it's actually a very positive thing that we're just so encapsulated by the design of the dragon that that's sort of like again, like it wasn't until this second watch, it wasn't until today actually when I was finding the images for
For the thumbnail.
thumbnail that I realized it didn't have wings. I was like, oh my god, like how does this not have wings? And when I was actually looking at it, I was like, oh well, well, there's 3 points right there that's just thrown off. But I do think that it just shows how good of a design it actually is that we didn't even notice that it had wings. But we'll go ahead and dive into special effects. I'll be perfectly honest. I am thrown, like, I know Netflix has money. They clearly have money for these shows. I am a little underwhelmed with the animation that they're doing because I know that they could be doing a lot more with it. It's not bad, the dragon, or just the animation in general in this show, but I know that the coffers that they have over there, they can be doing a lot more. And there's several moments where I'm like, wow, this looks really good. But I'm a little underwhelmed. So this might shock people, but I'm just giving it a 5. I think it's okay. Like, I don't think the animation is really anything to write home. I'm not going to say it's bad. I'm not going to say it's mediocre, but I don't think it's good. I'd say it's okay.
I absolutely agree on that one. I think I'm no like connoisseur of animation. People have shown me shows that are supposed to be really well animated and shows that aren't, and I'm like, they're both animated. I think that there's a style element to how they depict the dragon that, well, and I don't know if this is something that you would normally wrap into one of your later categories.
Colby, you can
When you're
categorize
about
anything the way you want.
alrighty, then I'm gonna shock you a bit, and I'm gonna give this an 8. And here's why. I think that they're doing a. I'm comparing this to Edge Runners, which is a
Okay.
fantastically animated show, and they clearly are taking a different. They're not doing super high frame rates and stuff like that, but what they're doing is low frame rate animations of an almost like impressionistic view of what a dragon is, and there's very few images of this dragon, both in the very first episode and in the big fight. And if you pause on them, they're distorted and they're weird looking and monstrous and almost extra horrifying. When the thing is moving, you can tell it's a very like normal looking dragon, but at the same time, they're doing it with images that kind of are off-putting and extra terrifying. So I actually appreciate, I don't know why you're right about Netflix having a budget. I don't know why they would have limitations there. But assuming that that was a matter of budgetary limitations, I think they did a fantastic job of making it feel a way that's very terrifying while also looking pretty basic at the same time, which I find impressive.
All right. What score does that lead to on that front?
I'm giving it an 8.
Gave it an 8. All righty. All right. I no judgment here. No judgment. I get where you're coming from, and I also I do appreciate the simplicity of what it's looking like, but at the same time, I need to get a lash every time I bring this show up because I bring it up every episode. Arcane showed me what Netflix has the money to do. And once I've tasted that sweet honey there, I can't go back. I can't be just over here looking basic animation. You can't just tease me like that and just expect me to go home. I've had the good life.
You're talking to one of the few nerds in the entire world who didn't even finish the first season.
Well, that's all we have for today, folks, because Colby is kicked off the podcast. Just kidding. No. I'm not joking when I say this, Colby. Arcane, especially okay. Sorry, guys. I have to do this. I'm doing this for Colby's sake. But I love Arcane. Everything about it. The animation is so amazing. I feel like all the story, every character, there is no good characters, and I don't think there's any truly evil characters. Every character, you can see where they're coming from. Yes, they have evil intention or they have evil goals, but they as a person, I don't think there's a single show that just demonstrates somebody that's like everybody has like a very humanistic reason for what they're doing, and they genuinely think they're doing it for the greater good. And for me, that's just so fascinating. And on top of that, it's a very like, yes, there's 10 episodes, I believe, and each episode is about 45 minutes long, but there's only 2 seasons of this show. Like they're going to expand on
Uh-huh.
it, but it's easy to consume. Like I've been telling my buddy who lives in Arizona to be watching it, and I've been telling him for years to do it. And he finally watched it and he made it to like the 4th episode and he's like, "Dude, why did I not start this sooner? This is incredible." So I've just got to get you to season 2, Colby. That's all I need to do. Find a way to get you to season 2, because it easily is one of my favorite things that I think it is my favorite thing Netflix has done. Like I feel like it's my favorite Netflix original, but also nowadays that's not hard to beat.
Yeah. Ooh, yeah.
The character of the Red Dragon. And again, like this is where 5e, I love what 5e does, where they give dragons a human intelligence. We do not get any of that here. Like it's just a big beast, it's powerful. There is like, here's the thing, like I don't want to say it's a 0 because like yes it doesn't really, but it's clearly animalistic and you can see that it is animalistic. And I
Yes.
don't want to say that because it's not, doesn't have a personality, that it has a 0 to its character, but I feel like they actually do a good job of portraying it, that it is animalistic. But at the same time, like it's just not that much to me. So I'm gonna give it a 4 for mediocre. I think it's just a mediocre beast. I think we've also just sort of supported this decision just throughout our discussion here, that it's meh, big boss.
Bringing in some detail that I was noticing in like the episode after the one that we're ending on today, our big bad to be at some point at at Fallon and is talking to her like she's the dragon and acting like she should understand. And so I think they're actually trying to have it both ways. It's just a big animal, so we don't have to feel bad about slaying it. It doesn't have a personality. We don't have to spend time and effort developing its personality, etc. But then they also try to have it a way where the mad mage can talk to it and be like, "Old friend, why do you look like that?" Which I think that's, if it was just an animal, I could give it a 5. I could even give it a 6 if it's a fairly interesting animal. But when you're going to break your own rules, and in one scene it's just an animal, and in another scene it's old friend and stuff like that, that loses points, honestly. So like I'm going to give that a 3.
Very fair. Very fair on that front. I am excited to see where they actually go with it, because because again, I've seen that point, it almost borderline gives the Mad Mage a druid level of like vibe there, where it's communicating with villains. But it's sort of tied to this. Did you ever watch the show Castlevania on Netflix?
I did not. I think I've had it recommended to me many times, and as I've said before, seeing that
Not
it's
an
an
anime.
anime style is a hurdle for me, and I never quite got over it with that show.
So the only thing that I think that you would find actually, I think there'd be things that if it wasn't anime that you'd find interesting. But one thing that I find fascinating is there's a potential D&D class that I love the idea behind. And the idea behind it is it's almost like a warlock and a necromancer combined together, where essentially it's a guy who has a dagger that if he stabs somebody and kills them, or stabs it into a dead body, it transforms them into a demon. So it's like, I like the idea of just having somebody who's like a beast master, but he summons demons. So like at the early levels, he summons imps. And then mid levels, he's like summoning some of these other lesser demons. And then towards the end, he's like just summoning, like, again, almost like solo leveling, where he's just summoning an entire army. Like he's not himself that powerful. He might, like, dex and intelligence might be his highest stats there, but like, and I'd even give him like a D6 for his HP. But once you get up to that level 20, like you can't stop him, because he has like, he has these arch demons that are just over here causing chaos for him. Again, like I know it's not as fun to play a character that's like commanding other troops, but there's something satisfying about that to me where like, yes, you yourself are just super squishy, super weak. And if somebody gets up and close and personal, even at level 20, you're in a tough spot, but you're commanding is just titans.
Exactly. Yeah, that's something that like I wish 5e could give us. But because of the way initiative order works and action economy and whatnot, I've tried playing that character. It doesn't work very well.
Someday, someday, someday. Alrighty, well, for this next section, I'm actually quite curious. I feel like it's going to do well. I know it's going to, I should say, I feel like it's going to do well for me. I know what score I'm going to be giving it, but I know it's going to do well for me. I'm curious on what you're going to be doing, but these first 12 episodes, I don't like, yes, I've had my problems with it, but I think it does a great job at introducing the show, getting us a good, fun foundation, but it also has been doing a great job at like sprinkling like the deeper things that are going on in the world and building out the world up more than just the dungeon, while still just having a goofy feel to what D&D is. And yes, I know this score is going to reflect more just my love of how it's portraying D&D, but it's a show dedicated to D&D, so I might as well. I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's a very good first 12 episodes and does a great job at really encapsulating that. I'm not going to go above and say great because there are some, like, again, the Mad Mage, like the villains don't feel villainous at this point. Like the most villainous character is the gnome. Like
Yeah.
I'm not even joking when it's the gnome is the most villainous character at this point to me. And unless plot twist, he is the big bad at the end of the series, which if that's the case, I will take this score back and change it all up.
I agree. I think overall, just as an experience of, consuming a piece of media, I think that it's certainly not perfect. I'm not going to like try to sell this to someone as high art. I think like you should expect some inconsistencies in tone and stuff like that. But I agree. I think overall it's really fun. Whatever weird mixture of elements they're playing around with continues to be fun, even while I can recognize things that I don't like. Those things aren't taking me out or ruining the experience, which I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to give it a 7 as well.
There we go. Skook Vodka Sven right here, combining there. All right, so we're down to the last section, which is sort of just like it's the X Factor. Well, you can give it credit, you can take away credit, but I'm going to take this as like yes, the design is pretty traditional. It's not really that different with the exclusion of wings, which it's getting credit because it doesn't have wings, and there's a lot of dragons that don't have wings, even though I hate that I'm giving credit for not having wings. But the main reason actually that the main reason that it actually is getting such a high score for me in the X Factor is I love how they went into deep detail on how it has its breath attack. Not only is there like a science to it where it's like it's clicking its tail, like trying to start not its tail, its tongue to like start a flame, and then it's spitting out the fluid there, but also it makes so much sense in a D&D where like a dragon has to roll to be getting its breath weapon back. And I've always thought like that's like how does that happen? Like a dragon would just have it back, but no, like this it's like having to wait and build up that fluid, and we come to find out that it's because it's burning all of the things that like don't digest well, and that's how it's producing that liquid. So it really could like take any amount of time to produce that much. So it can be that random, like it could take 2 seconds, it can only happen once in a day. You don't know. So for me, like I really appreciate that. And oddly, I'm giving it an 8. 8 is great. I think they do a great job at making this dragon unique from other dragons, and maybe not so much in design, but just that alone, like I feel like that's a good enough thing for me, at least personally. And I'm not telling you that you have to do that, but that's the reason I'm giving it such a high score on that front.
Well, you've gone and stolen my point there, because I really agree. I think that
You gotta be quicker than
what we
that.
keep coming back to that's magical about this show, which this show is imperfect in so many ways, in ways you probably expect, in ways that you probably don't expect. But what it's doing is it's taking things seriously, and it's taking them as real and existing in a world and having to make up ways for that to happen beyond, well, magic did it. And the fact that they have that tool in their toolbox for telling this story. They can just say magic did it. And they're not. They're making these biological creatures. I absolutely agree. I think the X Factor, just kind of that bringing some reality into it lets me look past the imperfections and the cringy fan service and the whatever else I can criticize about this. And I'm still just excited to see what they're going to do to make me rethink what a dragon can be like. We kind of like tangented our way out of it, but like I love how they did the Undine. I love how they did mana and spirits in this world, and they're making everything exist in a world instead of just, well, you wave your hand and it happens. They're kind of creating systems for all of that. So that's what just keeps bringing me back. So I'm going to give that a 9.
Oh, hell yeah. A 9, which that does give us a final score for the Red Dragon and Delicious in Dungeon, a 6.4, which translates to just between good and very good, which I think that's an appropriate spot for it. Before we wrap up, I actually do want to just discuss the conversation of mana and just magic in general, because I get it. It's so hard in a movie or TV show to just depict like your magic level, because you don't want to feel too much like a video game. Like you don't want to be like, oh, I only have 6 more levels to get, like you, and it's so hard, but you also like, it's not exhaustion, because like it's clearly something that's different from exhaustion. So you have to make it so it is. But I feel like, and again, it's not perfect, but I feel like they still do a pretty good job of like depicting that, because I get it. It is hard. And I am, as a writer who's dealing with like magic in a system, I to this day, like, I know Christopher Paolini gets a lot of flack on the internet, which I do not support at all. I still to this day think his magic system is the most straightforward and understandable like magic system. Like, you say X and X happens. If it costs this much effort in real life without magic, that's how much effort. Like, it's straightforward. It's to the point. Some people say it's childish, but like, does it need to be complex? Does it need to be like extravagant? I don't think so. Like, I think it's, I don't know. Like, I don't know if you have a particular favorite magic system in a book or a movie that you like to like reference or do, but I always say that Christopher Paolini is like the ancient language being my favorite.
Yeah, I like magic when it is dark and dangerous, when it's risky to use. And another piece of media that does a magic system really, really well is Full Metal Alchemist.
Yes.
Just telling you, this is how it works, this is how you can get it wrong, and you get an entire story out of that. That's perfect. I think because it's beholden to D&D and to, fantasy JRPGs and World of Warcraft and all of this stuff, all of which have to have something that limits what a magic user can do, for, making it fun for anybody who's playing something other than a wizard. They've got to explain that somehow. And I like the idea that it's like little spirits that are little microscopic spirits. I'm not among the people who hated on midichlorians from the Phantom Menace. I thought that, I was of an age where that was perfectly fine for me when they explained it that way. So I kind of appreciate it in the same way. We're explaining where it comes from. I think in stories, sometimes it's good for the writer to know where it comes from, and then to never say it. Which gives you, I think magic kind of needs to be mysterious to be satisfying. So it's this kind of trade-off of, I want it to make sense, but also if you tell me how it works and how it makes sense, it's going to stop feeling like magic to me. I think they're riding a pretty good line here in terms of explaining that like there's this whole economy and the dungeon is important for the existence of magic and whatnot, but also leaving things fairly mysterious with the old magic and all of this forbidden stuff. I think they're doing a decent job of it. I wouldn't say it's perfect or my favorite ever, but
I need you to mentally prepare yourself right now. I'm going to say something that's borderline sacrilegious. Who knows how many people are going to hate me for saying this. As great and amazing and as close to perfection of a man as he is, I feel like Tolkien has done one of the worst to doing, like, describing, like again, I understand the whole level of like mystery and like but his magic is such soft magic. Like, I don't even think there really is anything. You don't ever really see anything. Like, it's like, I've asked people what would happen if Sauron had the ring so many times, and people are like, "Oh, you don't even understand." Like, I'm like, okay, so what would happen? Like, as far as I know, he turns invisible. Like, again, like, handy, don't get me wrong, nifty, but what does he actually do with the ring? And like, he will destroy Middle Earth. Like, okay, is he a nuke? Is he like, what does he actually do? And I'm again, maybe he explains it in the Similarian, but I'm sitting here like, he does such a terrible job of like explaining his magic. Like, even with Gandalf, like, maybe I think he's like lit some things on fire with his staff. Sometimes he's made light. That's it. Like, he's supposedly this powerful.
It's the softest magic system in existence, and almost to the extent of not existing. And like, early on when I was reading the Song of Ice and Fire books, before, book 3, 4 came out, I was thinking that George R.R. Martin was going the same direction. It's clearly still a very soft magic system. What needs to happen happens. But I think that those are two great examples of how that can work. But you're absolutely right that they are not interested in explaining how. And it's important for both series that it doesn't happen a lot. Because if it happens a lot, but it's also just kind of out of the blue, then you're losing your readers immediately.
And again, like, I don't want this to come across like, I still love the Lord of the Rings movies. I still love the Lord of the Rings books. But to me, I feel like George R.R. Martin does a better magic system because there's clearly, like, I'm not saying X needs to happen for Y, but there's clearly something going on there where, like, if you told me that Gandalf was actually just a chemist and that's all he was doing, I'd believe it. Like, you don't ever actually get a feeling that Gandalf is an all-powerful wizard. Like, even when he's talking about his duel with the Balrog, like, he was like, we battled for 6 days. I'm like, doing what? How'd you fight? What'd you do, Gandalf? Like, he's like, let me tell you, it was great. It was excellent. I beat him so hard. You guys would love to see it. I can't tell you. I can't tell you any of the details. I turned white. Let me tell you, I'm the best. Gandalf the White.
I fell. I smote him, and then I paid him off. He's actually a pretty cool guy.
Let me tell you, easily corruptible. Those are my favorite types of villains. Let me tell you, easily corruptible. Now I'm gonna really make people sacrilegious that like hate me over here.
I mean, if you want the unsexy real answer to this, like why the Lord of the Rings is that way, is that okay, hot take here. The Lord of the Rings is not fantasy.
Okay, let's talk that through.
I'm just gonna lay this out. The Lord of the Rings is at best proto-fantasy, in the same way that like Deep Purple is not quite metal. It's kind of what came before metal, but it's not the same thing. And if you listen to Black Sabbath, that's not how most metal is. It's a very particular style. And it's not the crowd pleaser that the rest of it is. Anyway, I think that it's at most proto-fantasy, and more likely I'd call it exactly what Tolkien would call it, which is just an almost, like, if it wasn't so fantastic, so like if it didn't capture everybody the way it does, I would call it a masturbatory, like, digression into world building. Like, honestly, this guy, he didn't care if people liked it. And there's some amount of the magic behind Lord of the Rings that he just didn't care. and he didn't need it to be big. He wasn't trying to pay the bills off this thing, and so I don't think you can call the Lord of the Rings the same thing as all the other fantasy that's out there.
Yeah. I
Mic drop.
saw this mic and he's gone. The Lord of the Rings Secret Service come and take you out.
The Tolkien estate is surprisingly well armed.
So I saw this TikTok and I don't necessarily agree with it. There's bits of it that I agree with, but I don't agree with the full sentiment. But these guys were sitting around and they were discussing, and they're like, this is a hot take. They don't think that Tolkien was a good author because he was a linguistics, right? And he created a world around his language. Like, I think that's like, correct me if I'm wrong,
Yeah.
but that's how Lord of the Rings came about. It wasn't that he wrote the book, but he had created a language. He was like, all right, well, I need a world for this language. So he created a world. And I get the point that they're trying to make by saying, like, okay, like he's not a great author because, like, let's face it, when they're talking about the 4 mountain peaks shone white over there with the 3 stones that rolled down the side, and down at the bottom was a tree, and this tree had 6 grasshoppers. Like, yes, we get it, Tolkien.
Yeah.
Like, we get it. Move on.
Yep.
But at the same time, like, I almost wish like authors like George R. R. Martin had this level of like, just write what you, because again, I don't think that this is a controversial take. I genuinely believe that George R. R. Martin is terrified of what the fans are going to react to in
Yes.
Winds of Winter, because there's so many things that were similar to the show, and he just saw how many people hated the show. But I don't think that he understands that people didn't hate the show for like what actually happened, but they rushed through it so quickly that they didn't give a chance to like really develop what's going on in there. And I think that he's too focused on like, oh, are they going to hate it? Like, I don't want my legacy to be tarnished, which again, who am I to talk, because I've not built myself up like George R. R. Martin has, and like he has a legacy, and if he does never finish the books, like sure, that's going to be part of his legacy, but he'll also be like, this is such like what he has written was such a masterful piece.
Yeah, exactly. And you could put Patrick Rothfuss in the same boat. I feel like I would not want to be in either of their shoes. They had a series that blew up in a way that suddenly like you can't actually keep up with. I don't think Tolkien was working under that kind of constraint. I would probably agree that like as an author, Tolkien wasn't that good because he was doing a very dry, a very academic exercise, and he threw some storytelling into it. He had made The Hobbit for his kids, and he kind of wrapped that into the same world, and it had all this depth, and so he kind of stumbled on lightning in a bottle, but not because he was a fantastic author or because he could crank out works or anything like that, or because he didn't work under the same constraints at all. Brandon Sanderson, a lot of what he talks about in his lectures is not how to write a good story, but how to write a story that will make you a living. And I think you could make a huge argument that these other authors, having to not being British nobility in the middle of the 20th century, have it harder. And Tolkien, he might have found the lightning in the bottle, but I wouldn't say that he's, there's reason scholars keep studying it because there's depth there.
I'll finish up with this. I think Tolkien is a master like world creator. Like he's such a creative mind, and he was able to create that. And I think that's again just such an inspiration to me, where I like really want, like I'm not going to sit here and say I'm a creative mind, let me tell you. At the same time, like as DMs, like we have to have this level of creativity and a level of storytelling. And I feel like I've created something, and I want to like be able to put it on pen and paper and share it. But that's enough there. Colby, I would love to have you. Will you tell everybody where they can find you? So,
yes, I have thrown a couple of comments in our chat from my actual YouTube account, but head over to YouTube. Rock Paper Science is my channel. I'm streaming Delta Green, and when I ever have some time, I'll stream some gaming as well. And you can check out my link tree Find me on startplaying.games if you want to join any of my games. There's currently no open seats. So hopefully you're listening to this sometime in the future when that, if you've really got your heart set on that, sometime's going to need to pass.
Thank you for everyone for sticking it out for one of our longest podcasts to date. This is Big Flying Liz. We will be back next week to discuss Delicious in Dungeon episodes 13 through 20, 13 through, I don't know, math. I'm exhausted. I'm tired. You guys have a good night.
Should be it. Next time, 5 hours.
We're gonna end this series doing like an all-night episode. Like people, we're gonna have Josh in the comments like, please, I need to see my children.
We're gonna give Dan Carlin a run for his money on show length.
Dan Carlin is gonna be like, we're gonna put him out of business with how long it is. But good night, everyone.
Thank you.
That's all for this week's Dragon Lore. Takes cold and hot, spread shore to shore. Enjoyed yourself? Please join the squad. Follow on social media at Big Liz Pod. And one quick reminder before you go, to rate, review, and share the show. Thank you for listening. It means a lot. See you next week, same time, same spot.